well, this was pretty good, and I can understand that you're trying to protect who she is, but you might want to be a little bit more specific and never say, since you're available and all to a single woman. That's not a good idea. Yeah. And he was like, okay, and then dead silence. And it's starting to get uncomfortable silence. And the wheels are just starting to turn in my head. And he said, that wasn't role play. And I was like, excuse me? What?
That's so cute.
He's like, you're the woman. I was like, oh.
Eleanor read this for us, but we're going to dare to read it again. Bones on the floor of the valley, bones that were very dry. And he asked me, Son of man, can these bones live? And I said, Sovereign Lord, you alone know.
All right, well, Sherry, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
How you been doing?
I hate that question.
I'll ask a different one then.
Okay, great.
What have you been up to? Is that the same, or is that just
similar.
As bad?
I kind of feel like mostly work and ministry, and those aren't bad things, but that is what a lot of my life is. So
yeah. You're kind of like the Renew lady, in my mind anyways.
You know what? It's exciting that there's so many more people that have come on, so I'm not the only, but I am one of the OG Renew people.
In my head, you're the women's ministries lady.
Yeah.
I'm not very involved in that.
Okay, but that's what I know you for.
Yep. I have a couple of helpers or partners with that too, but yep, those are my two big main ministries. So they keep me busy. Yeah. And every once in a while I cook, do some laundry, do some dishes. But man, that's hard when you have a job. It's earning money to come home and then also be a homemaker.
Yeah, I bet. My dream life would be to not work, nor cook, nor clean.
Well, we all aspire to that.
Nor any of the things I'm supposed to do.
I hear you. I agree.
I enjoy cooking and cleaning. But
you could be a stay-at-home mom, Joseph. I feel like you'd probably be good at it.
Maybe a stay-at-home dad, possibly.
Okay, yeah. I feel like Elena could provide for you guys. I'm sure if she put her mind to it.
She could definitely. She could probably provide for us better than me. Because I don't really care about money. So.
Well, after she puts this baby out in a few weeks, put her to work.
Every couple has to figure out what works for them.
That's what you always say. That your advice with you and Ray sending emails, is that to each other? I started doing that with Josh.
And is it working?
Well, yeah, but then I remind him and I send. Well, this is what happens. I call him 5 times. I text him, he doesn't answer. I start thinking about, should I call his work?
Oh.
But then I don't do that. Instead, I send several emails because I figured he's on the computer.
I would just call the cops.
I threatened that, but no. I send emails and I figure he'll see those quicker. Funny. And then he does respond to the emails, my 5 emails.
I didn't use it for time-sensitive things. So maybe we should back up and tell people that one of Ray's and my communication styles, especially when I was home parenting kids and it's just hard to connect, was if there was something kind of brewing that hey, we need to talk about this sometime but not today, or it's going to be a decision that I know he's going to want to mull over, I would just email him hey, I've been thinking about this, or I wanted to get your input on that, and then I would sometimes it was short and sometimes I had a lot of thought that I put into it. And when you're ready to talk about it, let me know. And so he would mull over it or research or whatever he needed to do, and then eventually we would talk about it.
Yeah, I do it for things like that too, so I don't forget.
Did it for once and then let it sit usually. Or every once in a while, it's been a couple weeks, I would say, hey, did you get that email? Yeah, I'm still thinking about it. Okay. But yeah, if it was immediate, no. That would have never worked.
You gotta do the 5 phone calls, call the job, text message, email, and then call the cops.
If that works for you guys, that would not have worked for us. Ray would have said, stop!
I would be I'm so sorry I call you so much at work. He's like, oh, I don't mind. Isn't that insane?
I think there's a big difference there. I've known I hardly ever call Ray at work, even when I was home, and there were other women that were what do you mean? I call my husband at least once a day.
Yeah.
And I was like, he doesn't want to talk to me while he's at work. He's doing work things.
I don't know. Josh talks to me while he's at work.
Differences, see? Got to figure out what works in your marriage.
FaceTimes us. And I say, oh my goodness, I can't be a stay-at-home mom that stays at home. I have to be an out there mom. Anyways.
FaceTiming my husband from wherever I'm at. See, remote. You need an opportunity to just go remote with all of your media.
That's true. That's true.
So, Sherry, we usually like to ask people what their favorite color is.
Yes.
And what that says about them as a person. And I know you're an avid listener of the podcast.
I am an avid listener.
And so you know all that.
I do. So I've been thinking about these questions. My favorite color when I was young was brown, but then I couldn't admit that because it wasn't a cool color. So I kind of squelched that, although I still like a nice rich brown, but I kind of squelched that and I went with green. But kind of a, not so dark as forest, but not, like a darker, like maybe emerald color tone or a little bit darker green. So that's the one I stick with. But I still find myself like, ooh, brown is nice.
So like what shades of brown?
Oh, I did look up some color palettes once upon a time when we were going to do this. We had to cancel. So probably more of like chocolate has a lot of options, but maybe not quite dark chocolate, maybe more of a milk chocolate kind of brown.
With like more red undertones,
maybe a little bit less on the red side.
Okay.
But still but just not close to black, but still, it's still
like
a nice
true,
rich.
Yeah.
And where do you like seeing that color? Just in chocolate or
in mud?
Well, I wanted it in carpet when I was growing up. I was told I was get to pick my own carpet, and I wanted this beautiful brown. But my parents found some on sale while I was at school, and it was like caramel corn, and I hated it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think I hated it mostly because I didn't get to pick it.
Yeah.
I mean, if we would have gone to the store, I may have picked exactly the same one and loved it. But because I didn't get to pick it, I didn't like it. I don't know. I don't really have brown in my clothes, really. I think I like seeing other people wear brown.
So are you going to come into your truth now since your real favorite color is brown?
Well, I mean, now I like brown and green.
Or is that what you've been telling yourself for years?
It is. Like, once I was an adult and got over, at some point when I'm like, oh, yeah, I don't have to like what other people like. I still feel bad for people who like orange because I just think that's really not a popular color. Oh, but those people are strong that stick with orange.
Yeah.
I don't want to stand out that much. So I can admit that I like brown, but I guess I don't really think too much in terms of favorites. Now there's a lot of colors that I like.
Yeah, the house I'm working on right now, we're painting all the walls this tan beige, and then the trim is this really dark brown, like almost black. And I kind of realized halfway through it, we're just painting a Reese's cup.
Oh.
And I was
and do you like it?
Yeah, I do like it. It's actually really cool, but we needed to find a room and paint it like bright orange in there. So we get the full Reese's cup. Or maybe the outside needs to be orange.
Suggest that to the homeowners and see what they go. An accent wall, maybe that would be enough.
Yeah.
Throw pillows.
Oh, I really don't like when people make the brand connections to color combinations, because then that's all I can see. For our engagement photos, Josh said we look like McDonald's. And now I hate those photos. I hate them so much.
Oh,
and I picked colors I liked, but then he said that, and now I'm like, we are Ronald McDonald. We are a joke.
Yeah. We have some beautiful tulips that Ray selected and planted out front, and people think they are Iowa State colors, so that ruins it for me.
Right? It's that's not what you're going for.
No, that was not what we were going for.
I feel like red and yellow are the most typical tulip colors.
They are pretty common, yeah. So I think it's just people who wanted to give us a hard time.
Probably
Said, oh, are you celebrating Iowa State? We're like, absolutely not. We just have red and yellow tulips.
It was probably just Pete Gross.
It might have been. Or Troy Anderson. I don't remember which of them it was. But probably
for any opportunity.
Yes, yes.
Or our other question we've been asking is about the Ninja Turtles. Which Ninja Turtle are you?
Yeah. Ninja Turtles are not my generation, and my kids didn't do them. So you guys should tell me.
Oh.
Hey, I'm not that old. But you guys should tell, in general, you guys should tell me which Ninja Turtle. I did look at the descriptions, and I'm like, I don't think I'm any of them, or I'm a combination.
I'm not gonna lie, I watched the live action ones growing up, and it freaked me out that they had a giant rat, and I didn't like how the turtles looked. So the whole show made me really uncomfortable, kind of like Barney, because it felt like a cartoon mixed with real life, and it was just uncanny for me.
Yeah.
So I don't like it very much. But Joe, what do you think?
I have no idea.
Okay.
I don't think you're like any of the Ninja Turtles.
Thank you. I didn't really think so either.
But which one was Jenna? I forget.
Leonardo, maybe?
Is that what she said? Were you here?
I don't remember.
Well, I think whatever Jenna would have picked is probably, because I feel like you guys are kind of similar. You're fun and
Okay, I'll go with whatever your
Serious
sister
and-
said.
Fun and
no,
Jenna.
Which Jenna?
Huther. I feel like you're very similar to Jenna Huther in my
You know what?
opinion.
I think I didn't see her podcast yet. Is it a new one?
Yeah, it was
Oh.
released a couple weeks ago.
I'm behind.
Something like that.
Okay. Yes, I'll take it. I'll take whatever Jenna is.
Yeah. Yeah, I think whatever that one was.
Yeah, well, one of the reasons I can't really say is because I feel like I've known you my entire life, but I don't really like I know you in an interpersonal way, but I know like absolutely nothing about
Yeah.
like not directly interact.
The adult kid thing, right?
Yeah.
You know me as, oh, she was one of those women that said, don't run in the church. Or whatever else.
Uh-huh. So what is your earliest memory?
Well, I was thinking about that. I have a couple, and I'm not sure which is earlier. But when I was young, we lived about 10 miles in the country, and the closest town was under 800 people, so it still was not populous. And so both of my earliest memories involve driving to town, and one of the in bad circumstances. So one, and I think this is probably the older one, is they were paving part of the road like halfway out of town toward my house, and so we had to go a different route. And so I think I just kind of remember of like, whoa, like I was in the pickup truck between my dad and my grandpa. I don't know why I remember that. And just mesmerized of like, this is a different way, but we're still going to get there. Like it was kind of mind blowing. None of this looks familiar, but we ended up at the right place. And then the second memory, which I think I was 5, there was a huge, well, you guys weren't born yet, but this part of the state, there was a huge snowstorm with like 12, 15 feet of snow. But I was in Southern Iowa when we had a huge ice storm that knocked out our power for several days. So my parents loaded my sister and I up and took us carefully into town to stay with my grandparents because they had power. But my parents were in the middle of building a closet in a bed, like they'd converted a second living room space into like a bedroom, and I don't know why, but they left us in town and went back home and kept building by candlelight or flashlight or something. So I just remember the like, it's icy and there's no power and everything's shut down, and there's probably cars in the ditch, although I don't remember that super well. But yeah, we got to go take a field trip, but then mom and dad went back home. So maybe it was a vacation for them. I'm not really sure.
Get rid of the kids. Doesn't matter if we don't have power.
That's right.
So what part of Southern Iowa was that?
I'm from Clark County, which is in south central Iowa. So I-35 at Osceola, there's a casino there. It's like 30 miles from the border. That's the county seat of my town. So I was just 10 miles off the interstate.
How far is that from like Burlington?
Quite a ways. Burlington is like the southeast, maybe not all the way in the corner, and we really are south central.
Okay.
So just straight south of Des Moines.
So you're a country girl then?
Yeah. We actually lived on a farm until I walked to school from our move into town the last day of 4th grade. Because my dad, when he's moving, he says, okay, this is good enough, let's go. So we were going to move on like Saturday, and on Thursday night, he said, I think we're ready, right? You got everything packed? Let's just do it tonight.
Oh my goodness.
So my mom was like, okay. And so, I mean, I guess I don't know what day of the week it was, but I remember I walked to school my last day of 4th grade. But up until then, I lived in the country. And then I still had friends who lived on farms. I mean, we were in a farm community, so living in town was not so far removed. It wasn't like moving to Cedar Rapids.
Yeah. So what do you remember about growing up on a farm?
I remember the calves, or we call them baby calves, even though that's not grammatically correct, are so cute and have really rough tongues.
Yeah.
I don't really love the outdoors, and I think part of that, I don't know if I remember this or if they've just told me. At one point in time when I was maybe like 3, we had a duck or a goose. Now I don't remember which. It might have been a goose. And there's some story, like my grandma's cousin was raising and slaughtering them or something, and there was some problem with this one. So it ended up at my house, and it was mean. So if I went outside, it would chase me around. And I didn't have any siblings at that point to play with. So being outside was boring, and there's this mean animal chasing me. So I was more of an indoor kid. And then, like, the last couple of years that we lived on the farm, I had a baby brother. So my job was to babysit him while my mom was out helping my dad, for a few hours at a time because I was, like, 8 or something. So it wasn't paid.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I remember we had a party line, so everybody had their own phone number, but you didn't have a private line. So we had with some of our neighbors, I'm guessing it was just to cut down on the amount of wires and stuff they needed. So like I remember, and I wasn't really old enough to talk on the phone, but our barn caught on fire. And I was in first grade, and I remember my dad saying, "Frida, you got to get off the phone. I got to call the fire department. My barn's burning down." Yeah. And I'm sure if I lived there older, we would have pranked by like quietly trying to listen to our neighbors.
Oh,
you know, can
yeah.
you pick it up without them hearing the click? And how, can you not breathe and eavesdrop on our old retired neighbors? But
So wait,
I was too young to really get into that.
So like, if someone wanted to call you, they just called like everybody, or
There
they
was
called...
everybody had a special ring.
Okay.
So, yeah, so there were like, I want to say there were 3 families in our party line, but I don't know, maybe there were more. And I don't know how, I never called it because I was too young. So, but I think we had a unique number, but it rang at all the houses, but everybody's ring was a little bit different. So you knew which were your calls. But if you picked up the phone to make a call, there could be somebody else already using the line, and then you just heard their conversation. So the polite thing is you pick it up and you put it right back down, or you say, "Oh, I'm sorry."
That's wild, wild west.
Yeah, yeah. There was a town near us that had the last operator switchboard in the state. I mean, and I don't know how old I was, but probably school age when they quit. So until then, yeah, you called into one place and there really was the person with the headphones, and they had the big board, and they were moving lines around.
Oh my goodness.
So it was kind of a big deal when they probably moved to party lines, so going from the switchboard to like 4 people sharing a line. But I don't remember exactly how old I was. I think I was pretty young.
Yeah.
But it was kind of cool of like, oh, we're the last people. We thought that was cool. That's special.
Yeah.
We have this, or our neighbors do. Nobody else does.
Now the only people listening to your conversations are the government.
Yes.
They're your neighbors.
And whatever technology's on your phone, put the ads out for you.
So how many siblings do you have?
I have 2. I'm the oldest, and then I have a sister who is 3.5 years younger than me, and a brother who is like another 3.5, 4 years younger than her.
Okay. Was it fun getting siblings since you were, outside was boring, and
Yeah.
or was it just like, oh, there's work now, I've got to help
I think
with
we're
the kids?
kind of spaced out enough. My mom says, I don't remember this. Most of my childhood, I just wanted to be older. Like whatever the next thing was, that's where I wanted to be. So I don't really remember enjoying it. It wasn't bad. I just was like, I want that, just moving on.
Want to move on.
Just want to move on. So my mom says that my sister and I fought from the day I started kindergarten, which she would have been probably like 2, 3, until the day I left for college, because she's very independent. And so apparently I bossed her around, and when she didn't know any different, it was fine. But then when she had a taste of freedom of like, I could be my own boss all day, she did not want to do anything that I wanted to do anymore. So I remember arguing and not playing well with her, but I don't remember the golden days when we did actually get along.
That's funny.
So we all kind of just did our own thing. And then my brother was like 8 years younger than me and a boy. And so everybody kind of just did their own thing. We didn't really do a ton together. I mean, I'm sure we played dolls or games or some things, but it wasn't like, oh, we had this favorite.
Are your personalities similar at all?
Let's see. We did Enneagram a while back, and she's an 8 and I'm a 1. So not really.
Okay. Oh, I guess the 9 is next to the 1.
Yeah,
Okay.
and I'm trying to remember. I'm a 1 with a 2 wing, and I don't remember what her wing is. So that was actually helpful for us to understand each other a little bit better.
Well, it makes sense why she wouldn't want to be bossed around being an 8.
Yeah, when she didn't know any better, it was okay. But as soon as she found there were choices, yeah.
I remember I used to boss my sister around, but she was like way older than me and
Oh.
didn't realize that it didn't need to work that way. And so I would always tell her what to do and just boss her around. And then my dad was like, she's your little sister. And then one day she just told me no when I told her to do something. It was the shock of my life. It's like, what is this? They never told me what to do, but I couldn't tell them what to do anymore. It was really unfair. So I sympathize with you losing that power that you had.
That power, yep. It kind of came, no, my power didn't come back, but I remember like in high school, She was a freshman when I was a senior, so then I was just embarrassing, and you know how. I don't remember. Like, we didn't have arguments over it, really. And we were both a small town. We were both in sports. We were in some things together. And it was always just like, oh. I think she, at one point, or for a long time, probably was like, please tell me I'm adopted. Please tell me, you know, that you guys aren't really my family.
That's really
So
funny.
we kind of went, different paths. And school came really easy for me. And I think as a middle child, then she was kind of like, okay, I have to find someplace else to excel. And she's a fine student, so that wasn't a problem. But, like, you know, she didn't want to compete in that. She was like, I'm going to forge my own path.
Yeah, that sounds so 8. Like, I'm not going to be like you guys. I'm going to do my own thing.
Yeah.
That's funny.
Yeah, so that's probably another reason I don't remember, like, tons of closeness. And we were, she was forging her own path.
That's funny. Well, and it's usually the older sibling that's trying to convince the younger sibling that they were found in the trash. But, like, she wants that for herself. Like, I remember my siblings always trying to convince me I was found in the trash, and, like...
I think
It might be an African thing. I don't know.
It's more common than you.
No, I've heard of other people. Or I had a friend in school who, she was my age. She had a younger brother who was in my brother's class. And I don't know if he was kind of nosy or what, but one day she opened mail. It was like a medical bill. And he was probably like 5. And he's like, Mom, what's that? And she's like, well, honey, we haven't been able to fully pay for you yet, and they're going to take you back. We have to give you back to the hospital. So even the mom was doing it. You know? He was devastated. Like, what?
Take you back to the hospital.
Yeah, we
so
can't
funny.
afford to keep you. We're gonna have. They said pay us money or give him back. we unfortunately have to give you back. So no, there were a lot of right friends whose older siblings probably tried to convince them. But I was a rule follower.
So you weren't going to be lying to your siblings?
It's not going to be. No, that would be bad. I would get in trouble if I lied. So you don't want to get in trouble.
Were your parents Christians?
No, my dad was not and still is not. When I was in kindergarten, my mom said, hey, would you like to start going to church where your best friend from school goes? And I was like, okay. I mean, I had no idea what church was, but sure. So we started going to church, and then when I was again in 4th grade, that was a big year, I remember the pastor came out and did this little video series with her that kind of went through the gospel, and she got saved. Around that time.
Your mom?
My mom.
Okay.
Yeah. So I kind of grew up in this, a moral home, because my dad, even though he's not a believer, is a moral guy.
Yeah.
So it was pretty moral. But like as a teenager, I know I got to talk with my mom about this later, like as an adult. They had very different standards on like intimacy before marriage. And it was really confusing as a teenager of like, okay, I'm trying to follow God, but even my mom, who's a Christian, kind of isn't as strong on that line as I would like her to be. You know, I'd like to have somebody backing me up.
Yeah.
Rather than just, generic, kind of make wise choices.
Yeah.
You
like,
know,
what
kind
does
of
that even
thing.
mean?
Yeah. And as an adult, I got to talk to her about it. And she's like, I didn't really feel like I could verbalize a standard for you that was higher than what your dad, as the head of the household, was saying. So she's like, I followed like what he was saying, and I just prayed like crazy.
Oh, so she knew what was right.
Yep. So
she wanted to go
but
with...
she didn't want to oppose him. So it gives me a great appreciation for women who are in that unequally yoked situation, and how hard it is, especially when you're raising kids. Yeah. Of how do we set a godly standard when the husband doesn't really respect that, and how do you not undermine him but also guide your children? I mean, I made it through all of that, but it was that was probably the biggest like area where it personally felt like it impacted me, that they were not on the same page about that.
So when you started going to church as a kid, did you feel like you pretty quickly like developed an understanding of who God was and the gospel and all that, or did that kind of come later?
Right. The church that I grew up in, I don't always know what really they taught and what I made up in my head to like make sense of what felt like contradictory messages or filling in gaps of knowledge. But I believe that they did talk about like an age of accountability, and nobody put a number on it, but kind of this idea of like you're safe until you get to this certain level of understanding of your sin and your need, and then, but nobody like ever talked about how do you know when you've made it there and when does that happen.
I think if you can understand the doctrine of an age of accountability, you're past the age of accountability.
Right. Well, I would agree, but nobody told us that then. And so I was interested in God and spiritual things for sure. And then when I was in 6th grade, one of my friends got baptized. Now, so this was the other part of my dad not being a Christian, not going to church. In my own mind, like my friends whose moms and dads were both Christians were good families, good Christian families. And I wasn't from a good Christian family in my own mind. So like when she was the first of our peer group to get baptized, in 6th grade. And then I was like, well, if she's old enough to be accountable for her sins, then I am too. I better get on this because I don't want to go to hell. And so then, I made a profession and got baptized at that point. But, so I think, so based on what I was taught or what I understood, I would say that that's when I got serious about giving my life to Christ. But there were still a lot of things I didn't understand. But that's the age where I was very clearly like, I don't want to be separated from God. But I've been trying to be good for a long time.
So was it that you like got serious and understood the gospel in Jesus, or is it that like I've gotten to the age where I can be sent to hell, so I should like not?
I think like for my understanding at the time, it was probably kind of like this is the next step. Because I'd always, like I'd been to church and Sunday school and vacation Bible school and even Bible, by that age I'd only been to Bible camp in the summer for a couple of years. So I'd been to places with altar calls. My church did an altar call every Sunday. But for some reason, I don't know, I think really I felt held back of like, I think I had interest earlier, but I think I thought, well, I'm not from a good Christian family, so I surely can't get this sooner than the kids in the good Christian family do. Or other people won't believe me if I say it.
You have
because
to wait
I don't come from a good Christian family. So there was some of that, but I never told anybody because that would have been really scary. And been really vulnerable for them to say, you're right. So I don't quite know, like when, I think it was just a gradual, much like a lot of kids who grow up in the church and you just, you're always hearing the message and you get it. But in my case, there was a little bit of a, well, when does that really start to apply to me? Because it kind of feels like it should, but maybe it doesn't. Nobody's told me I've crossed that line.
And so you didn't have like a later on in life, like now I'm saved or now I get it. Like experience. It's just been
What happened later in life is I still wasn't confident in the assurance of salvation. And that's kind of a combination from probably some things my church taught, but more what they implied. So I had this, and then some things I saw in scripture. So I kind of, again, made up my own thing to make sense of everything that said, well, you can't lose your salvation. You're either in God's kingdom or you're out, but we don't really know for sure. Because you have to stay faithful your whole life. That's what proves, that's what shows that your conversion was genuine. So you just don't know. And that was kind of troublesome. I spent a lot of nights like in high school and probably early college, like praying before bed, trying to remember what are all the sins that I did today, God, because I don't want anything to fester. I don't want anything to grow. I just want to make sure we have a clear path that that I'm aware and that I feel bad and I'm going to change.
I want us to be on the same page. It seems right.
And then I would wake up and I would fall asleep praying most nights. And then I would wake up in the morning and like, oh, thank you, God. I don't know if I said everything, but thank you, that I get a new day.
Because you were alive again. Like, were you scared that you would die?
Well, I don't really think I was afraid that I was dying, but I was always happy that I didn't.
Oh my gosh.
What if I had an unconfessed sin? I wasn't quite sure where I would stand with God. And then if you died,
you could go to hell, because if you didn't
maybe. If it was a big enough sin, maybe I could have. So when I got to college, actually your mom, Brenda, went through a gospel tract with me, Do You Know For Certain? I think that one's still around. And like all the stuff was familiar until we got to the very last page. which then had 1 John 5:13, I tell you these things so that you may know for certain that you have eternal life. And I was like, that's what I've been waiting for.
And this was in college.
And that was in college.
Oh man, you lived a long time with fear.
Several years, yeah.
Wow.
And so that was huge. So then I felt like kind of like a bondage had been lifted, but like now I'm free to love God because I don't have to be concerned about, am I going to tick him off? Or am I going to find that I'm not genuine in my faith? Am I just deceiving myself? I don't have to worry about that anymore.
Yeah.
Because God wants me to know for certain.
Yeah. I can really relate to that. In high school, I would stay up all night, or at least try to, because I didn't want to die at night and go to hell. Because we had come out of the Mormon church a few years earlier, but I still considered myself a Mormon and believed Mormon doctrine. And so I had to stay awake because, if I fell asleep, then I would die maybe. And then, I could go to hell.
Wow.
And, not believe it. And so I would not sleep as much as I possibly could. And it got really, really bad but I wasn't saved. So there was some rightness. If I died then, I definitely would have gone to hell. But
there are people who have died because they didn't sleep.
Well, I didn't know that research. I just knew if you died and you didn't believe in Jesus, you'd go to hell. Yeah. So I definitely have lived with that kind of fear.
Did you continue that all the way until you became a Christian, or
I did?
Okay.
Yeah, I would just not sleep. I would stay awake as much as I could, and it got so bad to where I would hallucinate a little bit. I'd be going to school and I'd blink and I would be at school. I would go to the bus stop and then blink
and just not remember.
Yeah, and not remember anything because I'm staying awake. I'm just trying to be awake.
I'm glad you survived.
So that I don't die. Well, then I got saved when I was 18, in high school still. So the Lord didn't make me, live with that for too long. But yeah, it was I'm Mormon, and they taught too that if you sinned, the Holy Spirit would leave you slowly. So even if you had him, as you sin, he goes away, and then before you know it, he's too far gone. And then he slowly comes back. So if my spirit is far away from me, then I definitely can't go to sleep.
Yeah. So that reminds me, one of the things besides that verse from 1 John that's really been comforting to me is, and maybe to you too, is now I can't remember the reference, but where it says, it's in Romans, nothing can separate you from the love of Christ.
Yeah.
And in the list is nothing.
Is that Romans 18 or something like that?
8.
Romans 8, yeah.
And it might be 28, because I think 30, I think it's 28 or so, or in the 20s. But it says, there's a list of things that cannot separate you, and one of them is nothing in all of creation. And I'm well, that includes me. I cannot separate myself from God. And actually, if I could, then that makes me God, makes me bigger. So I don't want to be able to, so that also brought me a lot of peace. That was confirmation.
Yeah.
Of not only does God want me to know, but it's secure, because he has to be the one that to decide, and he's already decided.
Yes.
If you're in, you're in.
Well, and even the verse about, those who are weary and heavy laden, that kind of fear, that is so burdensome.
Yes.
And that's not what it should feel like to be a Christian.
Yeah.
Is that worry that you're going to die, that worry that you're going to hell, just all the time, the pressure on you is just should have been very clear to me that that's not how Jesus wants me to live if I actually have him.
Yeah, but if that's not how we see other people living or talking about, I don't know, left to our own devices, our minds just don't always go in that spiritual direction, especially when we don't have the Spirit to help us.
Right. Yeah.
Understand those things. We just figure out, what makes the most sense to me.
Well, and if you're sleep deprived, then nothing. Nothing.
You're at a definite disadvantage.
Yeah. So, you mentioned that you did some sports in high school. What kind of things were you interested in high school?
Yeah. When I was younger, I really liked learning, but I think I'd figured out that wasn't really cool. So, by high school, studying, which I would have enjoyed if I would have been probably in a more supportive environment. So sports, let's see. So I did softball, starting when I was young. We didn't have t-ball, so I don't know what age it started. But then when I wasn't that great. I'm not super, I have decent eye-hand coordination, but I'm not fast. My upper body isn't super strong. So let's see, 8th grade, you can play softball on the high school team. So 8th grade and 9th grade, I played, but I was a statistician. And my team was actually really good and went to a lot of tournaments. And so after my freshman year, I had a summer job. And by the end of the summer, I was homesick because like all summer I was either working or I was at softball. And I wasn't playing at softball. I was like taking stats. And I'm like, this is not fun.
Yeah.
This is not fun anymore. So that was the end of my softball career. Let's see, they introduced volleyball in my high school while I was in high school, and so I didn't play that. It was too late. But I was a student trainer for the football team. My best friend and I were, and so that was fun. So I do enjoy football when I'm at football. I don't like watching it on TV, but I love being in person at football games.
So that was like training, like helping other high school students train, or helping like
So it
elementary
was
school kids?
like wrapping ankles, getting ice packs. It was like the medical, like a precursor. Like my friend thought she wanted to be an athletic trainer, and I thought I wanted to be a physician assistant. So it was kind of like an early hands-on, here's a taste of medical stuff.
Oh, okay.
So like we had to take this class and learn all these different things about different injuries and injury prevention and injury treatment. And we had one of our football coaches was certified as an EMT, so he was like the one that was overseeing us. But it was really cool, and it was really interesting. But I did learn, at least at my school, football players are kind of low pain tolerance people sometimes.
Little crybabies.
Some of them were crybabies. I shouldn't say everybody, or I wouldn't say everybody.
Yeah.
But it was kind of surprising because I'm like, you guys look like these big tough guys, and you're not always. Now, fortunately, none of them were turning the mirror back on me either. So, and I did not tell them that. So probably stop. And I played basketball, I guess, too.
Wow, you're
I was a
active.
little bit better at that one. Well, I was in a small school, and people tended to either be involved in everything or nothing. So, like, I was also involved in drama. I was not good, but I was involved. I could memorize lines. And then some, other groups. 4-H when I was younger. I don't think I continued that in high school. I think I'd stopped. Well, did I? No, I did. I never showed animals, but like cooking, sewing, those kinds of the domestic arts. I did that in 4-H all the way through high school. And then there was like a Future Nurses of America Club, a Future Homemakers of America Club.
And you did those?
I did those.
Wow.
They weren't super involved, I don't think. Probably a couple of fundraisers. We went to an annual state conference somewhere.
Yeah.
It wasn't a ton of time. But I was really busy. I was newspaper editor my senior year, so our small town was so small we didn't put out our own paper, but like we got a half a page or something in the county paper. So I, made the assignments for other people and got this. We typed it, I think before, like, computers were newer at that point in time, or using computers for things like this. So I think I remember, we got to save it on a disc, and I had to drive it every week over, or the sponsor, one of us had to take it over to the newspaper office and drop it off.
But you weren't on a typewriter.
But we weren't
so
on a
that was
typewriter.
good.
No, I think, like several years before that is how they had to do it, is on a typewriter. So I think my senior year, my mom, it's like, was there even a week that you were at school every day? Because I just was involved in so many activities that sometimes took me out of school.
Yeah. Did you enjoy these things, or was it just, this is what you do?
I must have enjoyed them. I mean, I think I did enjoy them. And they were opportunities to just grow in different areas, So like in the FHA group for Future Homemakers, I ran for a state office. So I had to get up in front of a group of, I don't know, I mean, there were probably 1,000 people there and give a speech. So that was my first like big public speaking.
Yeah.
I'd sang and played piano at church before. That was like 200 people. But that was a really scary experience. But like nobody, maybe I shouldn't, it seems like there was one gal a few years ahead of me, but most people in my school didn't do that. So that was an opportunity to just try to stretch myself.
Yeah.
So I think I enjoyed, I don't love change, but I'm willing to take a challenge and try to do something
Like you have a
new.
growth mindset.
I think I do. When I'm aware of the opportunities, I'm not always seeking them out. So like I remember when, I don't know if it was my junior year or senior year of high school, like my guidance counselor who was newer to our school, had said, hey, you should take these like AP tests to get college credit. And we didn't have AP classes, so what he was advocating was just, get the book, study the material, take the test. But I didn't know what it was. He didn't explain to me what it was and why it would be valuable, because I was just like, what? Study extra stuff? Nah. I'm busy. I got other things to do. And then later I found out, oh, this is what that is? And I went back and I was like, yeah, I want to do that. And he's like, it's too late now. So I do think, that I would have enjoyed, so I wasn't going to seek it out. And that was before the internet, so I couldn't just like, what is AP?
Yeah, Google it, yeah.
And Google it. I had to learn from other sources. So yeah, I'm not like that eager, hungry, I'm going to go seek that out. Although now it comes out in little ways. Like my life group and my family laugh because somebody says, well, what is? Let me Google it, and I research it. Oh, this is that. So
you mentioned a couple times that like you wanted to do things that were cool. Do you feel like you were aware of that at the time, that like you were trying to, I don't know, would you call that like seeking other people's approval or?
Probably. I think I learned at a pretty young age, like I can't tell you exactly when, but low elementary school, that the things that I liked were not necessarily what other people liked. So like, I could geek out on learning stuff like, guys, I read this thing, or like, wow, did you figure out when they told us, to do this kind of math, at recess, I'd be like, whoa, and people are like, what? We don't care. So I kind of felt like there was this, like all the time I was growing up, that stuck with me, that kind of this, I can be authentic to who I am and what I enjoy, or I can put that aside and take on what other people like and enjoy in order to have friends. If I pursue what I like, I'm going to be alone. If I want to have friends, I need to like enjoy the things they enjoy. Now there was a limit, so like, and partially because I was a believer as time went on. So like I didn't drink, I didn't party. In fact, there was a, this is like way off. When we moved into town, we still owned our farmland and rented it out or whatever. And when I think it must have been when I was a junior in high school, there was a party at our abandoned house in the country, and I did not know about it because people knew, like, she's not into that scene, she's not interested in it. My sister, who was in 8th grade, did not know, but did know about the party. So people, like, did keep me out of things that they knew, like, so I was like a goody two-shoes, like, she doesn't care about that. And I don't really, I don't know what I would have done if I would have known. Would I have said something? I probably would have just kept quiet. But people, like, just did me a favor by not letting me know about illegal.
They didn't give you the opportunity to.
They didn't, because they knew, like, and I was probably an unknown to them. Like, I don't know what she'd do with this. She's not going to want to come to the party, so I don't even, we just won't let her in on it.
I would have snitched.
So in one sense, good for you. I mean, like, I wish I would be that, would have been that person. But I think I would have been just too concerned about, like, that's going to be really uncomfortable. And I don't know. Probably what would have happened is, like, the night of the party, halfway through, I would have told my dad.
Yeah. I can't take
this
thing
going on. I probably should have told you 3 days ago when I found out. But I'm telling you now because I can't take it anymore. That's what would have happened.
Well, and so did you, like, throughout your life and high school career, did you, like, do you think you actually then just started enjoying the things people enjoy? Or do you think you just brought along some of what you enjoyed while you did the other things? Like, I guess what I'm asking is, like, how do you know if you actually enjoyed any of those things?
I think part of what I enjoyed is as I get older, I get more quieter, but I'm social by nature. So I enjoy connecting with other people, so if we can connect over something.
Yeah.
It kind of doesn't, there are some things I don't want to connect over, but if somebody is saying, like, okay, so, like, let's just use, for some reason, Caitlin Clark has been, she's everywhere. And I haven't gone to watch her play. It would be fun, but I don't have this pressing need.
Yeah.
But if somebody was like, hey, if you said, Jara, hey, I've got an extra ticket, do you want to go? I'd be like, yeah. And it would be fun to see her, but it would be more fun for us to have that experience.
Okay, so you're saying you could enjoy nearly anything, like almost anything?
A lot of things.
A lot of things.
I don't know if I'm quite ready to go to nearly anything.
You can enjoy a lot of things.
Yeah.
Or find enjoyment in a lot of things.
Yeah.
I think that's a good.
But I also think some of the things I enjoy, I didn't get introduced to till college. So, like, when I was at college, I went to the University of Iowa, and Hampshire is there, which brings in big ish productions. And like I bought, and students can get tickets cheap. So I went to orchestra things there. I don't love orchestra so much, but dance, different professional dance performances, and Broadway. I love the Broadway shows. And then, yeah, so I did that for a while, and I went all alone because it was too expensive to buy, like, I don't know, the way the student tickets worked. I was just like, no, I didn't have any friends that really wanted to do that with me. And I didn't want to put out the money to buy a second ticket, like just to be able to find somebody to sell it to every time. So that was just kind of a study break of, I don't know, 6 times a year. I would go dress up and go to a Broadway show at Hampshire.
Oh, wow. That seems very cool.
And it was really fun.
Yeah.
You know, but then I got out of school and it was really expensive.
Yeah.
And then we had babies and this and that. So now, like just recently in the last few years, and Ray had never really done that, so we went to a couple. So now we try to get to at least one Broadway type show like every year. Sometimes we get to a couple. But yeah, between Des Moines and Hampshire. And
Which ones have you seen recently?
I think the last one that we saw was Come From Away. So that is about Gander, Newfoundland on 9/11. Planes were diverted there. So this small town took in, like, they doubled in size, taking people whose planes got diverted. And so it's really a cool production. It's kind of there's like 12 actors. They all have multiple roles. They're all on stage almost the whole time.
Wow.
But it's a musical, so there's a lot of singing. So you get to see some character stretching. And
That's really interesting.
it was a really,
I haven't
really,
heard it.
and
What did
there's
you say
a
it
book
was called again?
Come From Away.
Come From Away.
Yep. There is a book out. One of the guys that was in the group, like, one of the passengers wrote a book, and that book got turned into this musical. So I think that may be the last one that we saw, because that was last year. We haven't been to one yet in 2025. But that was really cool. But Les Mis is one of my favorites. I've seen that multiple times.
Do you like the movie?
It was good. I think I like it's part of the experience of being there, you know, so I like the live productions a lot better. And I like the original one better than, you know, after so many years, some rights change and people change things up. So the last time we saw it, like the on the barricade scene kind of at the climax of it, I just didn't think it was as powerful. And I'm like, no, I want the old way. So, and we were just looking recently. I don't think I have a new one picked out. Some of the things that are coming to the area in the next 6 months or so are not things I'm as interested in.
I heard Alexander Hamilton. That's what it's called. Was in Des Moines.
It was. I don't have a strong desire to see that one. I'm also like, so I want it to be kind of cool, but I don't want to do something just because it's popular.
Yeah.
And so I don't know. Like, I'm not. I'd have to listen. I'd have to listen to the soundtrack to see, but the bits of it I've heard, I'm like,
Are you into rap
no,
or like spoken word?
not so much.
Yeah, it's probably not your thing.
So I'm like, So I'm like, maybe. I mean, it would be very valuable. I mean, they're fantastic actors and singers, so that would be cool.
Yeah.
So like this for Ray's birthday this year, I had said, just pick something you want to go to and we'll buy tickets. You know, an experience. And he chose, when we went for Miles' graduation from grad school, we went to the Grand Ole Opry. It's there. Neither of us really listened to country music, so we didn't know any of the people. But this is the 100-year anniversary of the Grand Ole Opry.
Oh, wow.
So all year they have these showcase shows, like just at various times. So we saw 8 different known. Some of them were Opry members, some of them were younger up-and-coming stars with all these different styles of country and Western music, but everybody had like 15 minutes. And it was really cool. And we walked away, we didn't know maybe one song out of all of it, but there's such fantastic musicians and singers and, you know, the lights and the sound and everything. It was a really, really cool evening. And we came away like, I'm really glad we did that.
Yeah.
Even though I would not have necessarily picked, the Grand Ole Opry, because that's not my style of music. But it was really good because of the showmanship.
Yeah.
Have you ever heard of the Sight and Sound Theater?
Yes.
Down in Branson?
I have not been there. We've seen a couple of their, like, Netflix or whatever that they broadcast free on Easter or whatever holiday weekend. We've seen a couple of those, so I would like to see it in person sometime. Those are really cool.
Yeah. When my family was down there for vacation, I want to say like 5 years. Well, I think it was before you and Josh got married, so.
If it was 5 years ago, I would have been there.
So it would have been like more than 5 years.
Yeah.
Did you go to Branson?
Yeah.
Oh, so you were there?
In that one house that I remember we slept in the hallway.
I don't remember. Maybe you were there.
Did you room with Jonathan? You used to room with.
I can't remember.
Okay. Well,
I don't know if Jonathan was even coming at that.
well, I remember when my first one, Jonathan was there, and you guys like roomed together.
This is probably not interesting to anyone else, but anyways. We were in Branson, and I think we saw Moses
I wasn't there for that then.
at Sight and Sound Theater. And I just remember, like, whatever special effects type stuff they did for, like, or practical effects, I guess, for Moses parting the Red Sea was just, like, really awesome. Like,
Yeah.
they had, like, coming down the center aisle, there was, like, these huge, like, waving banners, and, like, they were blowing mist and stuff everywhere, and
Yeah.
there's people coming. I think there was someone coming down from the ceiling, but maybe that was at a different point, actually. Anyways.
You know, you see things like with The Chosen being crowdsourced, that you can donate a certain amount and you get to be on set for a day. And there's a part of me that thinks, oh, things like that would be cool. And there's another part of me that thinks, but then the magic might be gone, you know, because I like the finished product.
Yeah.
Where you're seeing, like, you're not seeing the wires and all that makes it happen. You're just, you can believe the magic. I'm like, I don't know if I want that taken away by, you did the same scene over and over. They're not done in order, and all the reality of what it takes to put it together.
Jonathan Rumi not being Jesus. Somebody
That's
asked
right.
him for something and he's like, no.
He doesn't always say wise things.
Yeah, he's not always wise.
Yeah, so I kind of go back and forth if that would be kind of a cool experience.
Yeah.
But I'm like, it's not something I'm probably going to pursue because,
Yeah.
like, no, I like the magic.
Yeah.
But yeah, my family's going back to Branson actually this year for vacation.
Do you know what showing it sounded Sight and
They're
Sound?
showing David.
Oh.
So I'm like super psyched for it. Because apparently it brings the show brings David from, like, you know, when basically the biblical account, like from when he's a young
Becoming a
man,
shepherd.
as a shepherd to like the end of his life. And so it's like,
Nice.
I'm looking forward
Maybe
to
they'll
that.
explain, Ray and I, because in our reading programs, we both were just in that area recently. And, like, why did he have to have the young virgin at the end of his life to keep him warm? If they explain that, let me know.
I'm guessing they won't touch on that.
Because young versions are the warmest.
I know. We were joking about that. Yeah, what is it? Do they have more body heat? Or, like, you know?
That I don't know. That seems like a medical idea of the time.
That is not. That seems like a guy that has lots of wives and just wants a young.
Well,
a
but
young
like the
lady.
Bible specifies, but David did not like have sexual relations.
Because he
with
was
her.
old and about
He does,
to
but then
die.
after he died, like, she was treated like,
Yeah.
you know, cared for life, like his wives and concubines. So I don't know. You know, there's those times. Like, there's a, Rich Mullins song that has this line that I didn't understand, and like years ago I'd ask Ray, what does that mean? And it says it's right there in the Bible, so it must not be a sin. This was talking about like Jacob and his wives, you know, and that, like, it goes on, but it sure did seem like an awful dirty trick, like when Laban the dad switched him out.
Yeah.
And I was like, what does he mean? And Ray's like, there's a lot of people that think if it's in the Bible, that means it's a good thing, you know, that this is right and proper. And so there are so many things that I wanted to be like, God, wait, was this good or bad? Like, I understand it's what you know, was David okay in this? Or
When
was
you
that a
get to
sin?
heaven, you should ask him what that was for.
Oh, my list would be so long if I added those kind of questions.
Well, one of the ones Josh and I have thought about, I forget who it was, like all the details are fuzzy, but was it Abraham who like needed his foreskin cut off and then the Lord's angel didn't kill him? Who was that?
Oh.
Like, she just figured out that was the thing that needed to be done so that, like, the wife, oh my gosh, I wish I remembered the details.
It does sound
But
vaguely
it was just
familiar.
so, like, random that she woke up at night, the Lord's gonna kill my husband, the thing to do is cut off his foreskin, without, like, a ton of prompting.
That is not a marriage I have.
I will
What about
have to,
you?
like, not me either. I would have
That
to,
wasn't
like,
Abraham.
who was that?
I don't know what.
We're gonna have to look it up after and put it in the show notes.
I guess I don't remember that part about, like, I remember something like that happening, but not the part about her being asleep and
Yeah, it was at
her
night,
having a
and the
dream or
angel
God
was
speaking.
going to kill the
Oh.
guy, and she was like, the thing that needs to
Wow.
happen is to cut off the foreskin.
See, now my researcher side just wants to whip out my
I
phone
want
right
to look
now
it
and
up
look
too.
it and Google
Like, who
it,
was
but
that?
I will show
Well, if
restraint.
Nathan were here,
Yeah,
he
if
would.
Nathan was still here, he could look.
He
it
would
up
look
for
that
us.
up for us.
Okay. we'll have to do it as soon as we hit cut.
Yeah,
To
well,
look it
that's
up.
one thing Josh and I are always like, but why?
Yeah. So I don't even keep track. Those aren't on my list of things to ask God because there'd just be so many of them.
Yeah.
And the older I get, I think that list gets less. So I used to joke, like when I was young, one of my ways of dealing with I don't understand God is I would say, when I'm queen of the universe, I'll do things differently. And like it was never truth.
Yeah.
It was just kind of that passive aggressive. I don't understand it and I don't like this, but God's God. And when
Yeah.
I'm in his place, then I'll do it. And like one day, Maria said, Mom, oh no, when are you going to be queen of the universe? You keep talking about this. She's only like 4. You keep talking about this. When's it going to happen? And I was like, uh-oh, I'm back to the corner. So I said, when God dies, that's when I get to be queen of the universe.
And then what did she
And
say?
she said, but God doesn't ever die. And I said, exactly. And she was so confused.
Like, oh, that's when she realized her mom's crazy.
It probably was. She kind of, we were at a restaurant or something. We were at separate tables because I was with a friend and they were with a friend. And so she wandered back, was not satisfying to her, I'm sure. But then, so that was kind of the beginning of my evolution of oh, yeah, when God dies, that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
But then, and then for a while it was like, okay, I think I would do it differently, but if I knew everything God knows, I would choose the same way he did because he's wise.
Yeah.
That was my middle point. And now I'm like, yeah, no, I have no interest
I do not want to be
in being in
queen of the
charge of
universe.
anything. And so partially some of those questions too, I don't know, God did it, God allowed it. He's
Yeah.
the boss, he knows.
Well, people say
I'm
we
just
won't
gonna
care,
say it's best.
but I feel like I'll care.
Okay.
I'll go and I'll ask my questions.
Jared will ask all the questions.
I will
for
ask
us.
the questions.
And the good thing is that God won't be mad at you.
No.
He'll know this is how he made you. Oh, yep, my mom once said to my dad, I don't know what was going on. I was probably in college or young, right after college, and she put her hand on his shoulder and said, "Remember, this is the curious one." And I'm like, I didn't know I was causing a problem by asking questions.
Oh, yeah.
So, God will not be like that. He will not be like, oh, I can't, how many more do you have? I'm tired of these questions.
Yeah. We were in life group and we were talking about if, when you get to heaven, what are you going to ask God? And we posed as if we're in a line and we're all waiting our turn. And Pauline said her question would be, why is her name Pauline? And then Kurt goes, you will have a new name in heaven. And she's like, but I still want to know why. And I'm like, and then he goes, but you'll have a new name in heaven. And I was like, Kurt, you're just going to have to wait your turn and let Pauline ask why her name was Pauline on Earth.
Can't judge
But
each
it was
other's questions.
yeah, he was like, but you would have a new name. Why do you care?
Well, all of the things we want to ask God when we get to heaven, 99% of them are things that will no longer
Oh,
matter.
yeah.
Why was that in the Bible? Does it really matter anymore?
Yeah.
Why did you do this? Does it really matter anymore?
No, it is not. But I
Most of them will not.
good to know. So what was college like for you? Going back to your...
College. Well, college was good.
So did you move away for college?
I
Or-
did. So, I came to Iowa City, which is about a 3-hour drive from my
Okay.
hometown. So, far enough that you can go home for the weekend and you don't spend all your time driving, but not close enough that you go home every weekend. And so that was good. I feel like that was a good distance to be. And I had one of my best friends from high school went also to Iowa the same fall I did, but we lived in different dorms. We'd made a choice of we want to have new friends, we want to branch out, so we weren't going to live together or anything. And then after 1 year she transferred away. So I kind of felt like college was my chance to find people like me, so in my small town growing up, I had good friends, and I got along with people, but I don't know. To some extent, we all have circles that you only have so many choices. But I had really looked forward the last couple of years of high school. I just want to get to a bigger place, have the opportunity to meet more people, and then figure out what do I like, and who do I really click with. So I think one of the things I was surprised about was when I first went to college, it took me a while to find a church. So I knew that should be part of my life. So I'd ask my pastor, again, before the internet, before I left home, do you know anybody? Do you know any churches? What should I do? And he told me one that was in the same denomination that we were in, but it was like out in Coralville, and I did have a car, but it's not easy to get to at school. Like you had to drive a car, and I went there, and like there was one other like graduate student. I was a freshman. There's probably one graduate student, and then it was all like older people. Now maybe they were 40, but they seemed really old. They seemed like 60 and above, and so it was just like, and I don't know, it was just like very dark, and it just was not very comfortable. And it was like, okay, this isn't what I want. But then I didn't know what else to do, so I kind of didn't go for a while. But I don't even think it was that many weeks before I realized I miss that. Like I want to find a church, and then I don't think I visited any others. But there was a chapel on part of the school grounds, right by the Union, and I think I asked my RA, hey, is there a church that meets there? And she was like, I think so. So I saw a sign or something, so I went there one Sunday, and I got there early, like, because I didn't know what time service was, so I just went at like 9 o'clock. And there was some guy there playing the piano, and this building holds like 50 people. It's a teeny tiny chapel. And there was a guy playing the piano, and you know, he was like, oh, well, I'm just doing warm up, but the service will start in an hour. So I just went across the street to the building and found a place to hang out for an hour and came back. So in retrospect, but it was really weird. Like my church I grew up in, there were like 200 people there every Sunday. We had a pipe organ and a piano playing at the same time.
Oh, wow.
I mean, there was just a lot going on. And, you know, the music was, I mean, it was hymns, but it was fairly upbeat.
Did they have a choir too, or?
We only for special occasions.
Okay.
So not every Sunday did we have a choir, but you know, but there was just the building was really, there was a lot of stained glass, but it was let in a lot of light. So, you know, and it was just this big 2-story open sanctuary with a balcony. So it was just very, I mean, to me it felt inviting and very light and very, you know, kind of just fitting with life. Yeah, it was a really good place to be, uplifting. And so I go to this place, and I really, the people were really nice and friendly, but they played guitar and tambourine and sang out of books that had verses directly from the Bible with guitar chords. So you had like no idea what notes to sing. They were all weird songs. But like every person took an interest in me, you know, like, hi, you know, what's your name? But they all asked, how did you find out about us? And this was also during a time when cults were being talked about a lot. So I also my high school was the beware of cults. So I was like, these people a cult? I mean, like, they're singing from the Bible and the preaching seemed pretty good. So I'm like, I think I'll keep coming until I figure out what's wrong. And I'm trying to think if there's anybody in the church now that Pete might have been around then. That might have been before your dad. Your mom was probably around. Maybe your dad was. Anyway, a few people. So it was the predecessor to this church is where I was. And then I just kept going back. Because I was still like, I like it. I'm going to go here until I figure out what's wrong. And I only went on Sunday mornings because at that point the church was so small. There was only like 2 life groups and only, I think, maybe 1 of students at least. And it was on a night I had a night class. And so I couldn't go. And then I think both of the first year semesters I couldn't go. And then I think the second year, people figured I'd been around long enough. If I was interested, like I would have shown interest. And so it wasn't until after my sophomore year, I stayed in Iowa City for the summer. And then that's when I got in a life group and really got to know people better. And that was about the time that I was like, oh, I was supposed to be figuring out how they're a cult. I haven't figured it out yet.
You forgot.
And it's been 2 school years, so I think it's okay. I don't think they're a cult.
So that was like after some of those people had moved from Ames, is that correct?
So the people from Ames moved over like in 85, and I started school in 86.
Okay.
So it was really the beginning. And I found out later that one of the reasons that everybody asked me, how did you hear about our church? Is I think I was the first person to like walk in that nobody had invited, that nobody had a relationship.
Okay.
And so at first I was like, okay, they're all really friendly and they seem genuine, but that's weird. Why is every single person asking me, how did you hear about us?
Which
And
way?
then a couple years later, I found out, they're like, nobody knew you. We were all like, who is that? Where did she come from? Who's met her before? And like, nobody knew anything.
They probably thought you were starting a cult.
They probably did. So that really became a big part of my college, especially after my sophomore year. That year when I stayed behind that summer, like I also lived in an apartment and the guys that were the managers of the apartment building across the hall partied a lot. So I spent like half the summer at, I don't like beer. I didn't then, I still don't like beer. So I'm not really a good party girl. but it was a social place to be, you know. So I spent half the summer at Bible study and hanging out with people from church, and the other half at these parties where most of the people were drunk.
And you were just kind of there.
And I was just kind of figuring out, you know, like what do I, because it looked attractive. It looked like people were having fun. You know, but by the end of the summer, I was like, this set of people, the church people, they genuinely care about me and they care about each other. And maybe, so that cool part was still a factor. Maybe they're not always cool, but it's genuine and I really like that. And I'm building relationships there. And this party scene, it looks like fun, but it's not fun if you're not drunk. And I don't want to get drunk. And the people there don't really care about me. You know, they really just care about themselves or a good time. So God really used that summer to help me carve my path and just have a really clear, like, which you got a foot in each place and you can't continue like this. What do you want to do?
Yeah.
So that was really pivotal.
Differentiate between the world and, you know, things of the Lord.
Not that I had it all figured out, but at least I knew, like, this is definitely the path I want to go on, and these are the relationships that I want to make the primary.
Yeah, I was going to ask if you were going to parties and having fun in college, but I guess that answers that.
Yeah, I went
She
to
was
some
going to parties,
but
but
I
not
didn't
having
having fun. And I studied, and, you know, I was in band, like, I played flute in a band, not a, like, rock band, like a concert band. I think I mostly just studied and went to Hampshire. I went to Broadway shows and I studied. That was a lot of
You
what
seem
I
like
did.
such an interesting person, like, in college. That would be so, like, what is Shari doing today?
I think, though, but I still wasn't, I guess I was reflecting on this earlier. It doesn't have to do with any of the questions you asked, but thinking back to, like, high school, I wanted to, like, not offend anybody. I wanted to be well liked, like, not by doing bad things, but by not being objectionable. But I also felt really lonely. And I figured out, like, years later through Renew that I didn't give people a chance to get to know me. Because by not giving them anything to react to, I also didn't give them anything to like. And so that kind of continued. I mean, so that had been my norm, like, you know, and so some of that kind of continued in college, where I was
just like to be a
like
pleasant
on the
person.
inside. Yeah, I mean, I'm a pleasant person, and I, you know, whatever. I mean, I'm flexible. You know, like, yeah, I'll go try that or do that.
Yeah, you were saying on the inside.
But on the inside, like, I wasn't really willing to be vulnerable. You know, I wasn't really willing to share a whole lot about, like, what do I think or what am I struggling with, or I don't even think I thought about what I'm struggling with.
Yeah.
You know, but I had never felt like people really genuinely cared. And so if you don't really genuinely care about what's going on with me, why in the world am I going to throw it out there? Because you're just going to trample on it. And so, like, I don't know that was true in all of those places, even going back to childhood, but that's what I perceived to be true. And so, yeah, I kind of was in this shell. But I was kind of content, you know, of like, okay, I know, like, there's my personal stuff and then there's my outward part. And they aren't in conflict with each other, but just this one is incomplete.
So what brought you out of that shell? Or do you feel like...
Last year? No.
Last year, Shari.
I think for one, like, you know, like I said, I was excited about going to college to find people who were like me, even though I didn't know what that was. And when I found out these are people that want to live for God wholeheartedly, like those are people that are like me. That was one step, you know, in that direction for sure. That, okay, it is okay to be excited about that or to want to pursue God and to want to live a holy life. And to invest it in other people.
So you said you had a moment, like you remembered the moment when you decided, like, I should like things that are cool or whatever, or I'm going to be lonely otherwise. Do you have a moment where you decided, like, I should not be as vulnerable because then I could get hurt? Do you think that was a conscious choice like your other choice was?
Kinda. I mean, like, I remember a series of... I mean, I really feel like that was like a first grade choice of, like, you know, on the playground of like, oh, this thing the teacher talked about, wasn't that really cool? Let's talk about that. And everybody's like, no, I want to play tag, you know, kind of thing. So I kind of feel like going way back there, that I realized from probably a series of different, like, conversations, at least with my peers. And I don't know so much like with my parents or with other adults. And probably, you know, like, not that I'm ancient, but every generation, I think we talk more about feelings and drawing our kids
Emotions,
out
yeah.
and stuff. So I definitely wasn't a kids should be seen and not heard kind of
Right.
generation. I wasn't there.
Yeah.
But I also was not in a family where it was necessarily like, let's all talk about our feelings.
Yeah.
You know, kind of like, we're going to assume everybody's good unless there's an obvious reason to see that you're not.
Yeah.
And I think my parents didn't really come from nurturing backgrounds, you know,
Yeah.
so I think they didn't experience that. They didn't really have that to
Well,
give,
Yeah.
you know, and so I think just a lot of things. I think even my parents in their marriage, I mean, they've been married for almost 60 years and they love each other, but there's a lot of things I think where they're really guarded even from each other, that's just been their experience of like,
Yeah.
when it comes down to it, you got yourself.
Yeah. Well, I wonder if that's like farm life or like being in a not fully, you know, Christian household or something. Because I like,
be.
I relate in that like when I was a kid, I remembered the moment I decided I'm not gonna cry about anything anymore ever, and I
Yeah.
just decided like I cry too much, and I'm just not gonna cry anymore. And then for years, I just didn't cry about anything. Like my mom died, and I did not cry
I'm
because.
not sure if I respect
just-
that or if I'm if I'm like just flabbergasted.
Well, yeah, you shouldn't have to like make decisions like that in your life. But I do remember like I decided I'm just not gonna be emotional anymore, and I feel like I really came into the personality that then grew and developed and changed. But like that's kind of like the
That was
moment
kinda
I was
your
like
moment.
my personality came into being.
Yeah, so I feel like mine was probably more of an evolution. So there's kind of an evolution of shutting down or like
Yeah.
not even, I'm just not going to explore these things because there's no benefit in exploring them.
Yeah.
And then when I got to college, there were some things it was more okay to explore. But then it was also interested, you know, so that's a place where you think, oh, like, you know, now there's all this opportunity to learn and stuff. And then I decided, there's some of it I just don't want to work hard enough to do that.
Yeah.
You know, that like I like it enough. I want to have a surface knowledge of it, but I want to have a deep knowledge of this. And I'll get a B in that class or maybe even a C because I don't care to like really dive in and just
Yeah.
memorize things for the sake of memorizing it, you know, but the classes that I was like, oh, this is really interesting.
Yeah.
You know, then those I would put more into and thrive.
So what
More in
what
them.
were you studying? What were you really interested in?
Well, I started out as a biology major because I wanted to go into a medical field. And I double majored in psychology because, you'll laugh, but that was the only class in high school where I got a B. So I had something to prove. I don't even know why I got a B in it in high school. I'm not quite sure like what my problem was in that.
So you're saying all the other classes you got an A.
In high school,
In high
yes,
school,
except
yeah.
for
Except
except
for-
for
so you
psychology,
didn't
I
get
got a
any
B. So
Cs.
then, nope, no C's, just all A's in this one B. So I was like, I'm gonna conquer that in college and prove that I didn't even need a 4-point. Just I had to prove if I had a degree in this, if I had a double major in it, then I will prove that I can do that.
That's
I mean,
so funny.
like that wasn't fully formed, but inside that really was part of my motivation. And then I figured out like all of my hard science classes are what would it be? Not social science, but the hard science, I'll call it.
Yeah, like physics and
Yep, I got like C's in those.
chemistry.
Because that just wasn't really how my brain was wired, and I'm sure I'd learned things, but after my sophomore year spring break, like spending the whole time studying for a midterm and then deciding to drop the class, because I still remember it was cell biology, and I'm like, I do not care if it's sodium or potassium that opens the channels for the nerve signal to get through. One opens it and one closes it, and I can't
don't
remember
know
which,
which.
and I don't care. Like, so I still remember that was the straw that broke the camel's back, and I'm like, this is not the right major for me. This is not the right career path. And so then, but I was like, 2 years in, so I just stuck with the psychology. But I had a roommate who was also a psychology major, and she like took every psychology class possible, and I had the minimum you needed to graduate with the degree. So even she like teased me, "You're not a real psychology major," because she would talk about things, and I would be like, "What? I don't even know what that is." She's like, "You didn't take enough classes. You don't know anything." But even my psychology stuff kind of landed on the hard sciences side, you know. So I did an experimental class that taught, like we did stuff with rats, and you know, she didn't take any of those. She knew all about Freud, and she did all the touchy-feely sides of it. And I even in that was more of the hard science end of psychology.
So do you feel like, because I know you've done like a lot of renew ministry stuff. do you feel like that was where it started for you? And like, did you want to take those psychology courses so that you could help other people? Or was that
Right.
not really even a part of it at that point?
It wasn't a part of it, and I think I didn't have enough awareness. So like knowing what I know now, or even what I found out later, like maybe social work would have been a good area for me, or even sociology. There are other things that maybe I could have pursued that may have been really exciting as a career, because psychology, I find it interesting, but it's not really something you go out and get a job in.
No.
But when I was in college, I also worked in the admissions office, and I really liked that. And I figured, or observing, I saw, the people with bachelor's degree have this job. The people with master's degree have this job. I like what the master's people are doing better. And I graduated during a recession, and I had like $500 in student loans for my whole undergrad career. Wow. So I went to grad school to pursue that. Like, I want that other, and it wasn't even that it was like more money or more prestige. It was just, I like the work better of that master's level job. So I pursued that, and it was called, what was it called? They've changed departments since then. But basically it was to do work anywhere on the college campus outside the classroom. So people with that major, some of them were admissions, some of them were in financial aid, some were in housing, some were in like student activities, just all the different things. Probably some were involved in like sports direct, not like the athletic, anyway, like programming kind of stuff. And then I never worked a day in that field. But one of the components of that was counseling classes. And that program that I was in had multiple tracks. Like, I could have gone into like substance abuse counseling in the community, or there were a couple other guidance counseling in school. That sounded interesting to me, but in Iowa you had to be a teacher at that point. So by the time I figured that out, I was like, well, I've already had 3 years of college. I'd have to have 3 more years of undergrad to go work for 2 years in a school, and I don't want to be a teacher to then come back to grad school for 2 more years to then and I'm like, no, that's too much. So that counseling stuff in college is probably more where I got the taste of like, I really like this, but I don't know what I want to do with it. And then but I opted not to do like a internship to get like licensed as a marriage and family therapist or whatever. I kind of thought about that, but I think I was kind of intimidating because I'm like, that wasn't really my emphasis area. Am I really prepared, or what would I have to do? So Renew has been a good fit for that. There's a lot of things that I saw, and in a couple of previous jobs that I had, where I'm like, God used all those things that I learned to help prepare me. So like, for example, one of my jobs after we moved to Cedar Rapids is I was a volunteer coordinator and did a lot of training at, now it's Waypoint. At that time it was the YWCA. But I worked a lot with people in the domestic violence and sexual assault program. So even though those two things, domestic violence didn't affect my life, I learned a lot, and that's been really beneficial in Renew ministry, because when I'm not freaked out by things that people share, bad experiences they've been through, because I feel like God prepared me to not be shocked by things, even though I haven't experienced them, because I'm like, there's just people are just evil and ugly, and they hurt each other, and they hurt each other because they're hurting, and so what they do is like not super surprising, because I understand what's going on underneath it. And I just feel like that's a gift that God gave me through all of these different experiences kind of leading up to that.
So what was that nonprofit job like? So I've heard of Waypoint, but I don't know exactly like what they do.
Yeah, I loved working for a nonprofit. So like, when I first got out of school, I ended up working for a for-profit company, and I didn't really love that. And then I did temp jobs for a year, kind of when we first moved to Cedar Rapids. And then I got this job, and I just loved it because it's human services. So you're helping people that are in a hard place. A lot of it's government funded or private grant funded, a lot of the work we do. But when I was there, there was a daycare, and some people were on block grants, but other people were able to afford private pay. So it was a mixture of kids from different demographics. Then we had a sexual assault program for people who had been sexually assaulted, whether that was a single episode or episodic, over a time period, like they grew up in a place where they were being molested, but helping them to process through things and to have coping skills, essentially, is what it was. And the same thing with domestic violence. And there was even a shelter that the program had then where women and children could go to get safe if where they were living wasn't safe. And then helping them with resources to be able to get clothes, to get food, to be able to get into more stable, more permanent housing, get an income stream. There was the last year that I was there, I oversaw 2 programs for kids with disabilities that mostly had other people that did the work. But one of them was a computer lab, and it had adaptive equipment and different programs, just to give them that experience. I don't think it was really geared toward like future job training or anything, but just expanding their options of what can they actually do. And the other one was a toy lending library that was kind of similar, toys that were adapted, so maybe it has a switch if you don't have good fine motor skills, so you can't hit the keys to play the piano thing, but there's a switch adapted that you can grab the joystick and move it to have it play different notes. That's a really stupid example, but that's one that comes to mind. Or just switches for on off, to activate and stop something, so you have a big pad to hit instead of a little tiny button. And so that was really cool. That expanded my horizons too, even though other people did most of the direct service, like just getting more comfortable. I hadn't really been around people with disabilities, so it was good exposure to some of the challenges. And then also seeing, okay, it might be hard for these people to express themselves, but they're really not that different, than me in a lot of ways, because I just hadn't been exposed to that. And then also, the last thing I think that we offered there was a supervised visit and neutral exchange program for families where there was a court order saying either the parents can't have contact with each other or one parent isn't allowed to be alone with the children. So that also was eye-opening, just about all the different dynamics and how manipulative people can be and things like that. So the first 3 years I was there, I was the volunteer coordinator, so I was mostly recruiting people to come in and help. But part of that was training new advocates to work with domestic violence and sexual assault. So that became a big part of my job, was focusing on that. There was also a homeless shelter and a homeless program, and I didn't have as much to do with that specifically. But they had 2 shelters at one point in time for women and children to come stay in.
And did
there was a lot.
Work at this place? Were you married to Ray at this point, or?
I was married, and it was before we had kids. We were married for 5 years before we had kids. So I worked there up until 2 weeks before Miles was born. That was where I was at.
You guys mind if you take a quick time out?
Yeah.
Go to the bathroom?
Not at all. I really wanted to be an RA in the dorms. And especially in our college church movement, that's the way you get to know people and you influence people. I still don't know so much in our church per se that was encouraged, but when you kind of looked at the Great Commission movement, that was kind of a big deal. And I was like, yeah, I could do that. I could be, and I wasn't hired for it. And then I kind of looked because I knew people that got hired. I'm like, they have something in common that I don't have, and I couldn't quite put my finger on what it was. But I actually, in part, I think looking back, one of the things I struggled with, and this kind of started in college, was now our society's gone way far the other way, but this idea of right and wrong, because I'm kind of black and white. And so I didn't have a lot of tolerance for you get to make your own choices. It's just that's wrong. That's bad, that's wrong, that's stupid.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't always say that to people, but that's really what I was thinking inside. And it took me a long time to be okay, or to accept that God says it's wrong, but some people don't respect God, or they don't care what he has to say, and they still have the right to choose what they want to do. Because they're yeah, so at first it's they have the right, but that's really stupid choice,
Yeah.
We should make sure they know that.
When you're queen of the universe, I'll be the dictator of wherever, and I'll...
So I kind of feel like I was late, at least compared to some of the people around me, to be okay with, you can choose, your values can disagree with mine, and that can be okay, especially when it comes down to God-defined values.
Yeah,
it's okay. I don't know. I still have a hard time when I say that it's okay to not like what God likes. I'm that makes me cringe.
You don't have to force that person.
Yeah, you can't force. I feel like
it's not okay and for them, but it's okay for you.
Right. And I think, even now as an older adult, learning more and more of like, okay, I don't think it's okay, but if they don't agree that that's not okay, then that's just between them and God.
Yeah.
That I'm not going to convince them that that's not okay, or that they should value what God has to say.
Yeah.
That's not my role. And then that makes the gospel really hard and confusing in some ways.
Yeah.
Like, God, where's my role?
You force people to
How strong, or like, do I wait too long, or...
Well, I feel like God gives you the people who will respond to your personality type and respond to the way you'll deliver the gospel. Ben Grosif told me it's okay to let people believe stupid things and wrong things and do wrong things. And I was just like, doesn't seem loving to me. But
so even now, that would still be hard. That's still hard for you to hear.
It's less hard for me, but yes, it's very hard for me to bite my tongue when I feel like somebody's doing something wrong or dumb. And it's really hard for me because when I see other people allowing like a friend to do something that's wrong and could hurt them, I feel like it's immoral that you're letting them do that. You're not saying something. And so I just, over my life, have needed to find the right friends that allow me to say the things I want to say, and they don't have to take it, but to allow me to say it. And say what I think.
I've learned to use, and I think of the verse about speaking the truth in love. I think that's really important.
Mm-hmm.
I've learned, and I don't know if it's necessarily just in somebody doing something like wrong or opposed to what God would say, but to ask questions, to kind of feel out where they're at. Are they open? Or not? Like, are you really convinced that that's what you want to do? And if they're like, then I'm like, okay. But if they're like, well, I don't know, I don't even know what my other options are. This just seems like the only choice. Then I would be more likely to come in and say something or offer an alternative. But so questions have been helpful. To me, that's like a safe space. Like, I can draw you out a little bit and then judge. Maybe I test the waters wrongly. Like, I'm not sure I'm always... I might not always be accurate. Maybe somebody would be more open than I think that they would be.
Well, and that's probably wiser. I feel like for me, when I say, oh yeah, I'm like 100%, there's always like, you can tell me. Like, you can still say stuff. I'm willing to change my mind given the right information, but I'm always 100% convinced on the things I'm thinking right now.
Yeah, because if you weren't, you would think something different.
Exactly.
Okay. I get that. I'm not that person, but I get that.
Not the best way to live life, but it makes things interesting.
Well, you're decisive, and I think that's there's different personalities that, like, I have to be 100% in.
Yeah.
And I'm 100% in with what I know until I know new, and then I'm willing to change.
Yeah, then I'm 100% with that.
Right. And I'm probably a little bit more like, there's always some wiggle room here. We're more space, but I'm committed to this for now. But I'm not going to die on it, because who knows? I might get more information later and change my mind.
I'd be dying on the hill before I have all the...
Takes all kinds.
Start from? Yeah.
You're just starting to talk about Ray and you guys' early marriage. So I guess, how did you meet Ray?
Yeah.
He wasn't the guy playing the piano when you walked into the
He
shop.
was not the guy playing the piano. No, he wasn't. We probably started coming around the same time, but even though the church was really small, we didn't really know each other. Like, we had a different friend group, apparently. Probably we were in different life groups once we both got in life groups. And we lived in different dorms, and we were in Bible studies in dorms. Anyway, so Ray and I were in music team together, and then I don't know what order everything happened in. So we both were in music team together, and that is kind of a trial by fire experience, because you got to put out a product every week, and musicians are artists and can have some strong emotions and strong opinions about artistic things, and then personality clashes. So, like, at one point in time, the music team was also a life group, because it's like, if we're going to spend all this time together, like, we don't have time to also do life group kind of thing, or to keep up so many relationships. And anyway, so you really get to, at least at that version of music, of worship team, you really got to know people pretty well. And then he was the leader at one point. I don't remember how long that was and where that fell with. He also, for like 1 month, dated one of my roommates. And that was really surreal. They had like secretly liked each other for like 3 years. And then they finally figured out like, oh, we both like each other. And they were both at the point in school where like, okay, this is time to test this out and see. And they had both spent so long like being just friends that they're like, no, we can't cross that romance line.
Yeah.
Like that ship sailed. It's really uncomfortable to think about that because I've told myself for so long we're just friends.
Yeah.
But during that time that they were like hanging out like that month, I was insanely jealous and I had no idea why. And I thought it was like because he was taken away from my relationship with her, which was probably a little bit unhealthy. And not just then, but in some other things that happened later. But I think I felt like I really connected with her in a way that I hadn't connected with a lot of other people. Anyway, but it didn't make sense. Like I even went and got counsel about like, I don't understand. Like what is wrong with me? Like why am I responding like this?
Yeah.
And the pastor was kind of like, at the time was kind of like, yeah, I don't know, that's weird. Because I think at first he was like, oh, are they doing something wrong? I'm like, no, I'm the problem. And I haven't, have you talked to them? No, I can't because I'm the problem. They're not doing anything wrong. And at one point, maybe it was after they broke up, that I had said at one point, like Ray's a really great guy and he'll make a wonderful husband for somebody, but not me. We would be a bad match. And my understanding at that time was that he like didn't have any opinions because he didn't really talk. He's watching and he was observing, and I knew he was a solid guy, but I was like, oh, I'll just run him over because I'm like, I have an idea or I have a thought or I have an opinion, I'm going to share it. And like, he never shares anything. He must not have any opinions.
Yeah.
Whew, that was wrong. But then, like probably a year and a half after he dated that friend of mine, we all went to a conference. Not we all. He and I and another guy were in a car together driving home from a conference, and the other guy fell asleep.
That's how love develops.
That's how love develops, is in the car. And we had like 2.5 or 3 hours where this guy slept, and we were just talking, and we were both both just out of grad school, both in our first jobs. Like we were just in a similar place in life. And like we knew enough of each other from band practice that we were comfortable like chatting, but we hadn't really had a conversation. And so we walked away from that. So that would have been like December. It was a Christmas time thing. And there was another guy that I had a crush on for like 2 years and I had just been wrestling with. And I had just told God, okay, maybe nothing's going to come of this because I've been waiting and waiting and you're not doing anything. Maybe it would be okay if he's not. This is when I still want to be queen of the universe. Maybe if he's not the guy for me, maybe I would be okay with that, God. But that's where I was at. And then Ray, like maybe late January, approached me, and this is really funny. Some people think it sounds mean, and I'm like, no, you get what you sign up for. You get with the path you start, you just get what consequences. And I was working 2 jobs at that time, so I didn't have a lot of spare time, and I think I had to drop something off at Ray's house for like music practice. And I left my car running because it was cold, and I was like just zipping in, and he was like, hey, can I get your counsel on something sometime, and it doesn't have to be right now. And I was like, well, I don't know when I'm gonna have more time off, so it better be right now. Let me go shut off my car. And and I came back, and then he was like, so he wasn't really ready, so he's kind of stammering, and he's like, well, there's this gal, and I've really been noticing her, and she's available and all, and I want to ask, I want to get to know her better, but I don't know what to say, so what should I say? And I was kind of like, I gave him some general advice, like, I don't know, like you should say something nice, like what have you noticed about her? And I don't remember what I said. But then I said, let's role play. Because I had a boss who made me do that at work for some phone calls, and I found it really helpful to practice and think through it. And he looked really nervous. And I thought, well, he just doesn't want me to guess who it is and like whatever. And so he said some pretty generic, lame stuff, including, since you're available and all. That was one of his things. Since you're available and all, would you like to get to know each other? And then he stopped and I critiqued him. Well, this was pretty good. And I can understand that you're trying to protect who she is, but you might want to be a little bit more specific and never say, since you're available and all, to a single woman. That's not a good idea. And he was like, okay. And then like dead silence. And it's starting to get uncomfortable silence. And the wheels are just starting to turn in my head. And he said, that wasn't role play. And I was like, excuse me? What?
That's so cute.
And he's like, you're the woman. I was like, oh.
This is like Korean trauma level.
This is making me think
And
of
he
a
just
Korean
looks so
drama.
dejected, you know, because he's like, obviously you haven't thought of me in that way. It didn't even occur to you. And I did, and I told him, like, I'll be honest, I didn't. And there's this other, I just, like, resolved with God, I might not be marrying this other guy. I just finally told God that was okay. So I agreed to, like, pray about it. And after, like, 2 days, I'm like, oh, I forgot I was supposed to be praying. So this probably is not good.
Yeah.
So I, like, whatever our arrangement was, I told him, like, I think you're a really great guy, but I just don't think, like, at least not right now.
Yeah.
And I think he had to, because he was convinced. And so he was like, well, I'll leave the door open so that if God changes your mind, let me know. Like, so he didn't say, I know, but he left the door open.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, okay. And almost immediately, God started changing my mind.
Yeah.
And then he got counsel from a guy who's a few years older than us that was engaged that said, don't leave the ball in her court, because that just opens the door for you guys to, like, struggle your whole marriage for who's really the leader. You need to be confident before God if this is something that you're supposed to pursue or not. Mm-hmm. So we set up a time that we were going to talk, like 2 or 3 weeks later. And I went to go tell him, yes, I've changed my mind. I'd like to date to get to know you better. And he said, let me go first. If you change your mind, I don't want to know. Like, if if God keeps it on my heart, I will ask you again.
Oh.
Like, when I feel like it's the right time. But yeah, and he kind of explained what the guy that gave him counsel had said. And he was like, and what did you want to say? And I have no clue what I said. Because I have no memory, because I was just like, oh, shoot.
Yeah, like, now I don't.
And I knew him well enough to know, like, okay, he said he'll ask again, but, like, man, he's going to be gun shy. And
I judged him the first time.
Right, yeah, and, like, he doesn't want to get shot down. I knew he was a tender guy, so I'm like, this is going to take forever. Yeah. So I started doing things like sitting by him in church. I had never sat by him before a day in my life anywhere.
Sure. I eat this stuff up. Oh, my goodness.
And then, so I would sit by him at church or, like, find reasons to, like, call him about worship practice or whatever. And later he said, well, I thought you were just letting me down gently.
Oh, my goodness.
And I was like, no, that is not what women do.
No.
Anyway, so, like,
it's almost like Christian flirting. Like, I feel like that's something that people need to know how to do, is how to flirt.
And interpret flirting.
And interpret flirting in a holy way.
Yes.
Yeah, and I don't know, like, because I did kind of go back and forth of, like, is this being manipulative or this? Because it didn't feel flirty. It wasn't like I'm trying to get your attention, but it was like,
I'm trying to let you know.
I'm trying to let you know.
Yeah.
Like, I'm trying to help give you some courage to ask, because I'll say yes this time. So that is good. If you see that as flirty and you see it as positive, that actually is helpful, because sometimes I am like, I don't know if that was good or bad. It was just what I did. Because I saw myself like 20 years down the road, like, he's still waiting. Still not quite sure he's ready, because he wasn't going to get shot down again. You know? But then somehow, and all of this really was like 6 weeks from start to finish. It feels like forever, but it was really short. And then we set up a time to talk. He finally, like, clued in of like, and we set up a time to talk. And, like, the last time we saw each other before that, I said, I'm really looking forward to our talk on, like, Friday. And then he's like, then I knew, like, okay, we're in the clear. So that was probably like March, and then we got engaged in July and got married the next March. So, and even from the beginning, I wasn't praying about getting to know him. I was praying like, okay, Lord, is this a guy I could marry? Are there any red flags? Is there anything here that would be bad? Like, for my walk with you and, for my life. So we, like, knew, even though we didn't, necessarily talk about courting per se, we both knew, like, this is intentional and we're not looking at, and we were also, like, 25 at the time, so old enough that we were like, we don't want to mess around. It's either in or out.
I was playing Korean music in my head as we were talking. I'm like, oh my gosh!
So then this part, like, feels anticlimactic to me, because I wasn't, like, you can't be in both places. But when you're watching the Korean movie. So then let's see. So he didn't propose yet. 4th of July-ish weekend, I was going to see my parents in Southern Iowa and then go to visit my grandma in Arkansas. And he was doing something with a friend near Des Moines. And then he's like, well, can I come down to your parents' house? He's met my family once at this point. Can I come down to your parents' house like for Saturday or for like whatever? And I was like, no. Because like we're only gonna overlap for like 2 hours. That's worthless. Yeah. And he's like, no, I really want to go like see your family, spend time with them again. I said we can pick any other weekend but that one, but not that one. No, you can't come. And he like kept pushing, and finally, like in exasperation, he said, I want to ask your dad's blessing to get married. I was like, oh, you can come. So and I can't remember if that was before or after we had a similar thing about rings, because I knew he was getting close to asking. And I had always looked forward to like ring shopping. Of like, oh, that will be so fun. And I have no clue. I feel like my fingers are short and fat, so I don't even know what will look good. And that will just be fun. So as I thought he was getting closer, I kept kind of hinting, like, can we just go and you can surprise me, but I just want the experience. And finally, through gritted teeth, he's like, I bought it in March. Oh, okay. I'm sure it's fine, whatever it is. So I just like kept ruining everything by having my own ideas.
Yeah.
So is that the same ring you have now?
It is not. It's the same solitaire, but we got it reset for our 25th, I think.
Oh.
Yeah. Okay, so I did finally agree to let him come to my parents, but it was this weird thing where we were there for literally like an hour, and my sister, I told her what was going on because she and I were leaving together, so she's like pushing me out the door, and Ray's still staying there, and my parents are looking at me like, what are we supposed to do with this guy? we don't know him, and he's not looking like he's gonna leave, and you guys are leaving. Like, what are we gonna do? And but my sister and I both knew then so she's trying to get me out the door. So he asked them, and my parents were like, oh yeah, they liked him and they thought it was great. And I don't know if Ray had left or if he was still there when we call him. Dad, we're driving down the interstate and our car got struck by lightning and now it won't work. Like all the electronics are fried. Yeah. Can you come like get us, bring us a different car? So, like, he shows up and my dad's just in shock. Like, this guy I barely know just asked to marry my oldest daughter, and then I get a call from my girls that our car is fried.
Yeah.
So we
hit
figured
your
out
car?
that lightning hit our car at almost the same time that Ray was asking my dad's permission.
Oh, my goodness, this is love.
So, and the lightning story...
I don't know if that's a good sign or a bad one.
Well, that was the end of the supernatural signs. Fortunately, we were a little bit worried about, like, the wedding or... No, that was good. But no, we're driving down the interstate and you can see like off in the distance, oh, there's some storm clouds and like, oh, look, there was a lightning strike like way over. And then all of a sudden like poof, there's a huge flash of light right by our car.
Crazy.
And my sister was driving and, and like just felt everything shut off. I think she felt like a little jolt. But I was like, whoa, that was really close. And she was like, yeah, I think it hit us because the car died and and then it's raining and then it just started pouring and she was able to get off the road and we stopped and a guy had seated and stopped behind us like an old farmer and gave us a ride. We were like a mile from an exit, so he gave us a ride to go call. But we were able to find the entrance and the exit place where the paint, like just this little tiny circle, was burned off of the paint.
Wow.
It was the weirdest thing.
Well, good thing we don't pay attention to old men as Christians.
When we're done with this podcast, this whole podcast project, I think we should do a Korean drama. Ray and Sherry.
Record it. You are my everything playing in the background. And it'll be beautiful. And he's Filipino, so that works.
Yeah.
It's like
I don't
Filipino
know
drama.
Yeah, I don't
Filipino drama.
I haven't watched enough Korean.
Just Asian.
To know how
It doesn't matter.
together.
He just needs to look Asian.
It's basically like the Korean version of a soap opera.
Yeah.
It is.
No, and I don't know the similarities between Korean soap opera and Filipino soap opera. I've seen
believe
some
there's
Filipino soap opera.
Very dramatic.
It's
Are
very
they more like
cheesy.
the Hispanic ones where they like slap someone and they're dating the cleaner?
Maybe. One I remember was A Christmas Story, and the baby was Jesus and Jesusa that were their babies.
Okay.
So I don't know. There's a lot of Catholic overtones and undertones in those.
Huh.
So maybe all the bad stuff is on the side.
Yeah.
It can't be openly. So that, but it's funny that you guys bring that up again and say that would be fun because we just get so many comments. It actually came up on this podcast of like how different we are, and people are like, I don't understand how your marriage works, but it seems like it does. Curtis said that. I don't get it, but it seems like it works. And like Ray and I have talked about that, and we're like, well, yes, on the surface, you know, like he's introverted, I'm extroverted, but we're like, but really, like we value the same things. We both enjoy like learning. We have a lot of similarities when you get beyond the
superficial
casing,
stuff.
the superficial stuff. So I'm like, I don't know why people keep saying, how do you guys go together? Because we're like, it works.
That's the true compliment of a strong relationship and marriage. When
Maybe
people
it
are
is.
obviously looking very superficially different.
It could be. But anyway, that's our story with all the drama.
I
It got
love
much
it.
less dramatic after that. Those were all the high points.
And so, you guys waited 5 years to have kids? Was that intentional or?
We did. We wanted to wait like 2 or 3, and then I had some health problems. My body randomly started making too much spinal fluid.
Oh wow.
And then the medicine, and my eye doctor found it. So my optic nerves were swollen, and if it wasn't treated, I would have gone blind or lost some vision.
Yeah.
Wow.
And the medicine that I had to be on to like reduce the spinal fluid production was specifically linked to birth defects.
Oh.
And so I couldn't. Yeah, so we had to wait. But then, and I also, I think this was just God's timing because and they had said, well, since we don't know what caused this, we don't know. I mean, it could just be a random weird thing that will go away after a couple of years, or it could be forever. So after like 2.5 years on the medicine, they tried bringing it down, and the problem didn't come back. And like the first month that the doctor said, okay, you're cleared, to like try to get pregnant, boom, we got pregnant right away.
Wow, praise God.
So yeah, but it was 5 years. But the good thing was, like, even in the hospital, I remember thinking like, wow, we are much better communicators with each other now. And probably part of that was me being willing to feel more vulnerable and share, more than I would have been like earlier.
Yeah.
And then even Ray, like I remember one of the things that was hard, so like I'm home with this newborn and I'm getting to know him, and that's my job. Like this is my role. I don't know that it wasn't 100% my identity, but a big part of it. And then when Ray would be home on the weekends and trying to do stuff with him, like I would hear him cry, oh, that means this. He doesn't like that, and trying to like coach Ray and how to parent him. And Ray, pretty quickly just said, no, be quiet. I need to figure out how to dad. I need to have my own relationship, and I might do things different. It might look different, but it's okay. And I needed to hear that. That was so good. And I don't know, 5 years earlier, would he have said that? I don't know. It would have been totally different. So I was really thankful that God did have us wait, so that we were just in different places, that we could be better.
So you guys probably didn't
parents.
mess Miles up as much as you could have.
I don't know. It's hard to say.
He has,
Probably not. Yeah, if we would have started younger, we would have messed him up more. I think that's accurate.
he has gone multiple states away from you at this point.
He has.
So.
Your mom once told me, didn't you train your kids that they were supposed to live close to you when they grew up? And I'm like, no, I didn't know. Like, Miles, ever since he was like 4, has been talking about moving far away. Like, I never expected him to stay close.
Yeah.
And Maria just didn't really talk about those things.
Yeah.
So who knows what she was thinking.
Yeah. That's funny.
I'm happy if anybody comes home.
So, okay, sorry.
No.
The spinal fluid thing was
Yeah.
very interesting to me. So, what is spinal fluid, and what part of your body produces it?
Oh, so spinal fluid is, your brain and spinal cord are enclosed, and there's a casing around them to protect them. And there's fluid that serves as a lubricant in there.
Like back here.
Your whole brain and then your whole spinal cord, so it goes down to like your lower back area. I don't know where it's generated. I mean, I'm sure there's some gland that's in charge of that. But it's a closed system, and it's not supposed to leak, and it doesn't, so it just, it doesn't go anywhere.
And so too much of it was...
So too much of it then was putting pressure on my optic nerve,
Okay.
so it couldn't operate correctly.
So there is fluid in this little pocket that's...
Yeah, so if you kind of think of, I don't know what it would be, but think of something that's a certain size, and then you are pushing more fluid in, it just adds a lot more pressure.
Yeah.
And we caught it really early. So a lot of people, their first sign is like headaches, or they have like black floaties, or their peripheral vision is getting narrower. And after my eye doctor found it, then I had noticed, oh, when I'm driving, cars surprise me when they come up even with me, or when they get to here, because my peripheral vision isn't very good. But I wasn't having headaches or anything like that, so he caught it early enough that we were able to get it treated. Yeah,
I think my peripheral vision is okay.
Great.
I don't know.
There's visual field tests that your eye doctor can do if you're not sure. It's like these blinking lights off to the sides.
Oh, yeah.
And you look straight ahead, and it's like how many can you see in your periphery? I've done so many of those, I really can't do them anymore. Because my brain imagines things that aren't there. And they're not accurate anymore. So kind of burned out on those. But yeah, so it was too much. And so like when they did a spinal tap to like collect fluid and like study it, see if they could figure out what was going on. But I had so much, they took off 5 vials of it just to like get it down to a normal pressure again.
Wow.
Wait,
so there was
this
a lot.
Fluid?
Yeah.
Well, where did they take it from?
They put it like
your lower
kind of
back
like an
then?
epidural. I mean, it's the same like area.
Okay.
But they just, I can't remember which one is deeper. They're like going in different places.
Yeah.
In the space and in the sac in there.
So is that a similar thing that happened to Jess McMaster? Did you talk to her about that? Because she had the headaches and spinal fluid, and they had to like take stuff like.
Yeah. So I think with either you can get the headaches, and I think supposedly that means like, well, I think if you get the headache with an epidural, it means something they poked where they weren't supposed to.
Yeah.
But with mine, they had to poke into it, and it just means that like it didn't close fast, like it didn't scab over. I think it's supposed to be that there's supposed to be like the pressure is supposed to then like I don't know what keeps it from leaking, but but basically just the pressure helps it seal off, and then it scabs over. But and like I had the really bad headache because like mine didn't do that correctly, and I wonder if it's just because they took off so much. It was such a change, so that was like not fun. But when it came then time to have babies, I was like, I'm not getting an epidural. Because I can't imagine going through childbirth and having a newborn, and like if you sit up, like you have this raging headache, the only way you feel good is laying down flat on your back. I'm like, I can't imagine that for days. I can't imagine that with a newborn. So it was like no epidurals. But yeah, so it was just my body. So I had benign intracranial hypertension is what they call it, which is just too much pressure in your head.
Too much headache.
Too hot-headed.
Too much fluid. Too hot-headed. Yeah, I don't know, something. And so it was just a weird anomaly.
And did you guys just want to have 2 children? Was that like planned or?
We originally, this was kind of a cool thing. Ever since we started like talking about being together, we both wanted to have 1 or 2 or adopt 1 or 2. So like we wanted the experience of having some, but we were also like, there are so many just kids that need a good family. So we want to adopt 1 or 2. But just the time to adopt just never came. So like we had 2, and then we got pregnant with a 3rd, and I miscarried, and then later found out that was a hormone issue, and so I was done. Like I was in menopause in my mid-30s. So there were no biological babies. And then we kind of talked then about adopting. Like I remember like researching Bethany Christian Services and some different options. But then we started to understand, we didn't know I had a hormone issue. We just knew I had this miscarriage. But basically, what happened is, I was in menopause kind of overnight. I went from being pregnant to being menopausal.
Wow.
And so like my body chemically was a mess. And so I had just this roller coaster for the next 15 months while they figured out what was going on of like mood swings and energy and stuff. So we kind of put that on hold. And then there just was never a good time for adoption because I had a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old and had all of this going on. So my plate was full.
And when you found out you were in menopause, was that depressing? Was that sad? Or were you just...
At that point, it was kind of a relief because we'd had 15 months of like, something is not right, but what is going on? And I was a little bit frustrated because like all the way at the very beginning of that journey, like, you know, after you have a miscarriage, they say in like 4 to 6 weeks, you know, things should start to get back on track. And if they don't, let us know. And the very first time, or maybe the second time things did not get on track, I had said, can you test my hormones, like, and see like what's wrong? And I didn't ask the doctor, that was just the nurse. And she was like, no, not really. And I'm like, okay, well, they fluctuate. And if they were working, then things would be working. So obviously it's just going to be abnormal. And I just didn't know very much about how all that worked. And 15 months later, then the doctor said, we should test your hormones. And I was like, oh, seriously?
Oh, goodness.
So at that point, it was just a relief because
Yeah.
I'd just been on this roller coaster.
Yeah.
Of like just days of like I can't do anything. So I didn't have classic clinical depression because usually that's like a 2-week episode, and I would just have days, like 2 or 3 days, and then I would be fine. So like I was co-leading a MOPS group, which is kind of like our Titus 2, and that met 3 Tuesdays out of the month between the meetings and then a leadership time. I never missed a single one of those. I never had a bad day on a MOPS day, and that was just the Lord. Maybe Monday I was down, maybe Wednesday I was down, but every Tuesday that I needed to be there, and it wasn't just showing up. It was like just my normal outgoing, ready to, like, I was a leader, ready to be in charge, do the job I needed to do. It was never a struggle.
Wow.
So God really, that was a gift. But then it also made it challenging of like, what is going on here?
Yeah. Well, and the blessing is that, too, there wasn't the disappointment of we want more children or like, people that plan to have 4 or 5, 6. Like you didn't have that. You wanted just a couple. So it wasn't like,
right.
Now you have to give up the dream of I wanted to have all these children.
Right. Yeah. So we were happy to
blessing.
be pregnant with a third, but I also think like, I don't want to go into too much detail, but I had complications with the miscarriage. So it was physically kind of traumatic.
Yeah.
And then it was physically traumatic for Ray to walk beside me through that. He hates the hospital. He hates, I got cut at my brother's house, and Ray was like, you drive her to the emergency room because you know where it is, and I'll stay here and cut up the vegetables she was working on. Like it's not his jam. He just hates it. And so, so we both, like, even at the hospital, the miscarriage, we're like, you know what, let's look into adoption. We don't really need to have any more babies. So so that was, I think, a God thing. Was it kind of a hard, there's a little bit of disappointment of like, that option, that chapter of my life is over.
Yeah.
Whenever you are, I think there's, even if you're ready for it, I think that can be hard for women, but it was more of a relief of like, now we understand what's going on, and my body really is broken. It doesn't just seem like it is. It really is.
Well, that makes me really happy though that you guys just wanted 2 children, and it like through the hard times and the complications, like the Lord,
He did.
Yeah, He delivered for you guys, and He provided.
I joked and said if I had more than 2, I would lose one. I have one for each hand, and that's really all I can keep track of. And we were at some women's event, like caroling or something, and girls got to come with us, and I don't know if I don't know what it was, but there was another woman that Maria was more hanging out with, and that woman was like, I can see why you say that about yourself now. Because I was just enjoying interacting with the other women, so like Maria was not my priority at that moment. I knew she was safe.
Yeah, she was around.
Yeah, she was all with women I trust. But this other guy was like, oh no, you're right, you wouldn't be good with more than 2. I wasn't quite sure. I'm like, okay, I'll just take that as face value.
Yeah.
No, and I have talked with some other like ladies in the future, or like after that, who were kind of torn between like, I want to have a big family, but I also want to be in ministry. Because that's the other thing, it let me be in ministry. Maria was I pregnant with Maria, or maybe she was 1 when we started Renew Ministry kind of stuff. If I had more kids, I wouldn't have been able to do that as much. Because, with more kids you have, the more you have to be focused at home, and you have to be focused on your kids. So I feel like it was really God's grace that allowed me to have a smaller family and be more flexible and just be available to serve in other ways. It's very important to serve your family, serve your kids, serve in your home. And some women are built like that. That's all they need to be fulfilled and satisfied. I am not a 10 children, I just want to be at home baking bread and training my children for 30 years. That's just not how God wired me.
Yeah.
So it was His grace that we had a small family. And my kids are pretty, like being quiet, like I could do ministry and just leave them alone for 2 hours unsupervised in our house. Even from a fairly, not like 1, but lower elementary age. And it's like, I'm here. If you're broken, something's broken, bleeding, it was all B's, broken, bleeding, barfing, or burning. You can interrupt me, but otherwise deal with it. If it's not an emergency. And they were fine. And they loved it. They were like, woohoo, no adult telling us what to do for 2 hours. But if we had more kids, that would have been a lot harder.
So where did your involvement with Renew Ministry start?
From the beginning. It was your dad and Jane and I don't even know how. Your dad must have found the materials because it was just a book. And then did we watch some tapes? Maybe we watched some videotapes.
Wait, so Kurt didn't come up with Renew?
No. So it's based on a thing called Theophostic Prayer Ministry, which was designed by a guy who was both a ordained minister and like a secular or Christian psychologist. He had he had training in counseling things. And I love this. The title of the first book, at least the first one we were introduced to, he may have had one more earlier. His technique was called Beyond Tolerable Recovery. And like that, and I'm just like, that is so perfect. But he also had worked with a lot of, and I think this, well, I don't know, one of his two parts of life. A lot of people that had some pretty extensive trauma and even some satanic ritual abuse, and was just finding a lot of the tools that we have aren't really helping them. And so then he came up with this other approach that is not quite, I mean, it's similar to Renew. Now it's been so many years, I can't tell you all the ins and outs, but it really fit. And most of the things, there were probably a few things that he did that were a little bit more, we would consider a little bit more mystical than we wanted to get into, so we adapted it just a little. And this guy was like, Ed Smith was the guy that created it, and he's like, if you do what I do, call it what I call it. If you tweak it, give it a new name. And it wasn't like a don't you dare. It was just like, I just want to make the lines clear.
That makes sense.
Of this is consistent, that you can take my idea and play with it, just call it something else. And so pretty shortly, we did that. That's how we got prayer counseling, was one of our first big offshoots. But it's kind of interesting because we went this direction, and then I don't know how, soon after Ben Hunt was probably on staff, several of us went to a training that Ed Smith did in like Minneapolis, and he had evolved his ministry, and we'd evolved to pretty much exactly the same place. So it was kind of interesting. God kept changing his ministry too. So we've done some different iterations, always with the idea, I think, of like, how can we reach more people? Because this works for this subset, but there's this group over here that just it isn't connecting for. How can we reach more? So that's why it's had so many changes, and that is not my strength. I am not like in the moment doing it and analyzing it. I don't have those two tracks, to do it. But I can be very intuitive of like, I'm meeting with you, and focused on you, and like, what are we trying to do? What am I listening for? How can I draw you out? But I'm not good at the like, oh, this isn't working, we need to do this other thing. If it's not working, I assume it's me or them, oh, they're not ready, or I'm not asking the best question to get us there.
So if you were talking to someone who like had never done Renew Ministry, and like you don't really know where they're at with even like understanding their own emotions or whatever, how would you describe what Renew Ministry is?
Yeah, I should have thought about that better ahead of time.
Just like in your own words, like it doesn't have to be a perfect.
I'm trying to make it like not ramble.
You can
and like,
ramble.
what's my entry point? So, when bad or hard things happen, and or traumatic things, and trauma doesn't have to be like I was abused or I was kidnapped. Trauma can be like something hurt me, and it made me, just something hurt a lot, and it doesn't matter what it was. So when we experience trauma, and it's not resolved, it's not processed, we don't have the opportunity to make sense of it, it gets buried in our subconscious. But there's a message that we take about ourselves from that, and often those are messages of things like I'm alone, or I'm not good enough, things like that. We don't think about them every day because we would be destroyed if we did that. And these things often happen, or not everything, but it starts when we're young, and we just don't have the tools and the knowledge and the life experience to really be able to process. Little kids assume everything's about them. So if something bad happens, oh, that's my fault in some way, shape, or form. But so it gets buried in our subconscious. We don't recall it every day, but I think of it as like a train car. And then over time, we have more cars that get added. So like, let's say if I feel I'm alone, well, at first, it happened here, and then it happened a year later at this birthday party, and then it happened when I wasn't picked for the team, and we're not making a conscious connection between all of those things. But what happens is when I'm 16, my reaction to that is out of proportion from whatever I've just experienced. And the reason is because that whole train has come to this moment where I didn't get to be homecoming queen or something. And it just looks like this huge out of proportion response. And that's what's going on. So what Renew does is it helps us, it uses the emotions that we're feeling as a bridge to help us find what is the lie that you're believing about yourself. And lie meaning where you're seeing yourself differently than God does. And then, speaking his truth, letting him speak his truth to that place. And it just does something supernatural that when that 5-year-old girl, that believes I'm all alone, understands that God says, no, it felt like that at the time, but you really weren't. I knew what was going on, or this person was there to help, you just didn't know it. Whatever the truth is of that situation, it somehow unhooks all those other, often, not always, but often unhooks all those other train cars. And then you don't struggle with that feeling anymore, or at least not as strongly. So that's how that Renew is a tool that lets us do that helps us recognize. And we're kind of asking, well, what if people aren't aware of their emotions? A lot of us aren't, so that's part of the skill is learning to recognize your own emotions. I still, even after years of being involved in it, and there's so many times in the past, not recently, that one of the lies that Satan often is that you're such a hypocrite. You help other people do Renew, but you're slow to do it. You should be doing it a lot more. You're still too messed up, kind of thing. But my emotions, if I get really upset about something, it just feels like this big ball that's stuck in my throat. So I can't talk. I can't really think. I can't unravel it. I can't process it. It's just this is overwhelming. It's huge, kind of thing. So, but it's even helped then for me to so other people I think maybe it's a different experience physically, but that same thing of I don't know what it is. It's just a lot. But help us to to be able to put names to our emotions, to be able to recognize them, to be able to separate them. So it's not just this big tangle, but oh, this is betrayal, or this is feeling left out, or.
Well, and to
different things,
recognize that you are overreacting to something and it's not about the person, whatever the situation is, to have that awareness of this person isn't actually causing this. It's my own trauma. It's my own baggage.
Yeah.
Not taking
I don't like the word
person.
Overreact personally. I'm not picking on you, but that was something as a kid. I do have strong emotions and didn't really know how to control them. And I often got to some extent the message was you're overreacting.
Yeah.
So I really and maybe I was. I just sensitive to that. But I like the idea of out of proportion.
Out of proportion. Yeah.
If somebody cuts me off in traffic and I shoot them out of road range, that's kind of an out of proportion response.
Yeah.
And so balance. Or if I'm struggling with the same thing all the time, if I'm always getting angry, that repeated, kind of thing. Those are those red flags.
Yeah.
It was revolutionary to me, though, when, Kurt, at one point, now he said this several times, but the first time I remember hearing him say, when you're a believer and the Holy Spirit lives in you, your normal is to be filled with the fruit of the Spirit. If you're not feeling love, joy, peace, patience, then that's abnormal. And I was like, no, that can't be true. No, he's exaggerating. He's overstating it. That's our goal, but what? That's not normal.
Yeah.
But darn it, as often when he and I have theological disagreements, the more I pray about it and research the word, he's 99. I don't want to say always, but I probably should say always. Right. But that
you'll listen to this and next time you guys disagree.
Don't tell him.
Yeah.
But that's even been helpful. Oh, I'm not feeling joy. I'm not content about this. I'm dissatisfied. Oh, wait, there's something there. And it doesn't have to get huge and out of proportion or be, what was the word? Overreaction. I can know inside. I feel unsettled about that. There's probably something there that I would be wise, to dig into so I don't have to deal with that unsettled feeling. I can just be at peace.
Yeah. Your example of something stuck in your throat, you can't think, you can't do anything. My hold up with peace, Renew, is that when I come, then I've made it a big thing. Now I'm doing this whole meeting with another person over this thing. This is the overreaction in of itself.
Oh, interesting.
Is my hold up. It's it does not need to be this big. And that's the lie, like, I would have to get over to get myself there.
Yeah.
Is I should just think about this on my own or move on, get over it, or something like that.
Yeah. And now you know, like, okay, that's just a guarding part to keep
It
me
is.
away from it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we all have our different things. You know, like Jane and I for years have done this with each other. And for a long time, we don't do this so much anymore. But like we would get to the step where we would recognize, okay, this is the lie you're believing, and let's present it to God for truth, whatever. That's changed over the different processes. And so many times one of us would say to the other one, I mean, well, we can if you want to, but this is just factual. Like, there's no lie there.
Right,
This is just, this is truth. And the other one, you know, the one not in that place is kind of like, oh my gosh. But it just feels so true. I likened it to if you are looking at a beautiful table with a beautiful finish on it and you're like, oh, that's just gorgeous. It's perfect. Well, then it gets scratched and you can see, what? That's just MDF. And it's been, you know, it's a veneer that's put on it. You can never see it as perfection again. And when we're not aware of those areas or those lies, then it just seems normal to us. But as soon as we see that scratch and we can see below the surface of like, whoa, wait, there's something else, there's something more there, then we're not satisfied to live with that lie anymore.
That's true.
Well, maybe it takes a little bit of growing on us, but you know, we can't pretend that it's all okay.
Yes.
Because we've seen below the surface.
Yeah, once you know, you can't unknow.
Yup. But you know, but we still keep growing. So even like that tightness in the throat, or that like, here's all my emotion, I've realized recently I still experience that when I feel attacked. That's my immediate response of like, whoa, there's too much here, you know, or I don't know how to, you know, like I can't, it's coming too fast, I can't process it, I can't figure out how to respond. But that used to be a lot of different things. And now it's, so I was like, praise God, you know, I'm not perfect yet.
Yeah.
But it's an area where like my emotion doesn't control me in the same way that it used to.
Yeah.
I think that's like the craziest thing to me doing like Renew Ministry or just dealing with emotions is like the physical side of it. Because, you know, people will talk about like a tightness in their chest or like a weight on their shoulders or like pressure in their head. It's not spinal fluid, or maybe that is spinal fluid.
You don't have emotional problems, you have spinal fluid.
And like for me, I experienced some of those things, but the one that like, so like for probably like a year, this was like 2 years ago maybe, I'd been trying to do like Renew Ministry for like probably a year and not really getting anywhere, because every time that I would get down to like a deep emotion, you know, like you ask like how and why, and get down to a deep emotion, and I would just start having vertigo. Like my head would spin.
Crazy.
I have that.
My head would spin, and I wouldn't be able to put sentences together for like 30 minutes.
Wow.
And eventually I was doing, Andy Vire was doing Renew Ministry with me, and he's like kind of studied that kind of stuff a little bit more. And he had, I guess, the wisdom to recognize like, this part of me, there's actually a part of me that's causing this vertigo that like doesn't have the words to express like, I don't want to feel this emotion, so it just takes over and does this thing. And it's like that tightness in your throat, like that's probably a similar thing. I mean, there's this part of you that like doesn't know how to say it, so it's just doing it. And it's like, it's weird that those kinds of things can be in our brains.
It is, and that it physically takes over your body.
Yeah. Because we like to think that like I am my conscious thoughts, and I'm in control of myself.
Is that like possession?
I don't think so.
Self-possession? Taking over of one's self without your will? I don't know.
Possessed by myself.
Yeah, no, I think it's just different parts of your brain. So like, I work in an OT clinic, OT and speech right now, and one of our OT therapists talks a lot about upstairs brain and downstairs brain. And a lot of this, we're in pediatrics, so it applies to kids. But when you're emotionally stirred up, you can't think logically.
Yeah.
You know, and we know that like from Renew stuff, we talk about that. You're either in your logical mind or you're in your emotional mind. But that emotional mind is often fight or flight. It's survival mode, you know, and we can feel that even emotionally. You know, it can be physical that we're like, I'm in danger, you know, I got to fight or flight.
Yeah.
But also emotionally, I feel trapped, I feel cornered, I feel like all of this rush of stuff and I don't know what to do with it, or it's too much, it's too intense, or there's too many, or I'm being put on the spot. We get into fight or flight mode, and so that part of our brain kicks in to
And it
protect
just
us,
does
and
a
it just
random
does
thing.
it. Yep, and
Yeah.
it's God designed that because there's a time that we need it. Oh, I walked into this cave and didn't realize a bear was there. I don't have time to think about it. I just need to run.
How do I feel about this bear?
That's right. Is
Well,
he really a threat? You
well,
know,
if
you
you-
need to analyze it.
Depending on how Joseph would get vertigo. Where's the bear? I can't. And then you would get tinnitus and
Yep, I'd be
I might just
choking.
fall asleep.
No, but those are good things for us to recognize about ourselves. Mine
Yeah.
doesn't sound as intense as yours, but I would be like right before we're at that bottom lie, you know, which now it would be the how and why questions. Right before we get to the bottom, I would start to feel like things were spinning. But I learned, I don't know, and I wouldn't tell anybody because that would make you vulnerable. But it's after maybe the first time I went through that, then I realized, oh, that was right before we got to the place we needed to be. So I knew, like, okay, that's my mind or my body playing tricks on me, and if I just go a couple more steps, you know, then I'll get the release. Or for a long time, I could tell, like, I would just feel this heavy weight. It was like this weight was pressing down on me.
Yeah.
That was before the spinning, but at some point in the process, you know, and that would be like, oh yeah, we're getting closer, because it just feels like I called it the black cloud. It really felt like there was a black heavy cloud just sitting on my shoulders, and that was always lie based. There was something hard that was truth based. It didn't feel like that.
Yeah.
But not everybody has that. But
Yeah, and I mean, kind of how that resolved for me was that, you know, Andy just kind of asked me to, like, let this part of me that was doing the vertigo thing, like, whatever it felt like it needed to say, just whatever. And it was really vivid, just instantly, like, this, like, I had nothing in my head because it was just really hard to think. And then, like, instantly, it just snapped, and I just had this vivid vision that I was inside this, like, bubble with this part of me, and this part of me was, like, I don't know, trying to keep things out. And so then just connecting with that part, it's like, oh, well, it's okay if things come in. Like,
yeah, and then it lost its power over you.
Yeah.
We I am a little bit scared to share this because we're probably weirding people out. But when we first were doing this, like, you know, just working with some people with some pretty intense trauma is who we were working with in the beginning. And I had this fear of, what if I have some repressed memories? Because one of the people I worked with a lot had a lot of, like, years of repressed memories that she had no clue anything had happened at all until these memories started coming up. And so then I was like, you know, there's a lot of things. I don't really remember my childhood vividly, and I don't think anything bad happened, but I do feel kind of messed up, you know. What if I have? And I was so afraid of that we did this whole session with your dad, and Jane and I, like, that's what we ended up doing, is kind of looking. That's not how we set into it, but that's what happened. And I'm picturing myself, like, going down this, like, ramp into this cave, and we get in this dark cave, and there's a cage there, and I'm, like, scared to death because the cage I know has whatever this is. And finally I open it, and it's empty. And I am so relieved. And your dad and Jane are both like, what? It's empty after all that build up. And I was like, oh yeah, no, I'm good. That was one of my best sessions, and they probably both would be like, oh, I remember that one. It was so frustrating.
nice.
That's funny.
Yeah, but I needed to deal with that fear that there was something lurking in my past that was, you know, like a big thing that was going to ruin me. So I'm like, great, I just have normal, weird stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think I have any repressed memories.
But you should go back anyway.
But I should find out.
Don't ask your dad to help you go to the cave and look for them. Just, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's crazy that there are parts of you that don't know the gospel and aren't loved. Like that part of you that's, you know, creating vertigo just needed to have the chance to express itself and to feel loved and safe. But then a bigger part of you knows the gospel,
Right.
and knows God's love. Well, I guess that's, what is it? sanctification is applying the gospel to yourself every single day.
But I wonder if, like, I don't want to go too far down this road because I'm not a super philosophical person, but sometimes those parts, because they're so painful, get kind of cut off and they become isolated, So if you could be your 4-year-old self, you wouldn't know how to multiply anything, and it wouldn't seem weird to that 4-year-old. It's just, I haven't learned that.
Yeah.
And the same thing is true about our, both our spiritual growth and even just our mental, intellectual, emotional growth. They're just like, 5-year-olds think everything is about them. Something bad happens, that must have been my fault, or somehow they're at the center of everything. And so if that gets encapsulated, especially if it's like too painful, like who wants to relive that over and over again?
Yeah.
Some people do, and they're not in great places mental health wise either. But to function, there comes a point where we kind of, those aren't what we dwell on all the time.
Yeah.
So to me, I guess you're right. It's just fascinating to me of how God made us so complex, and yet so simple in other ways. But he built in that protection mechanism to say, like, okay, I don't want you to dwell on that, so we're kind of tuck it away.
But you can bring it back up.
Yeah.
It's terrifying to me that Gwen will grow up and have a renewed ministry about something I did to her. And that'll be so hard. I have to get over it, but I just can't.
Well, one of the things that I realized this a while back, I don't know when, but God is perfect, and Adam and Eve were still a mess too, So even God, who is perfect and the perfect parent, his kids still had free will, and they were still deceived. They were still subject to deception. So, Gwen's not going to be better than God's kids.
No, but I think the hard part of that would be that it would be true. Whatever the thing was, like, it would be true that I hurt her. It would be like an actual flaw that I have.
Some of the deepest healing I think that I've seen from people is when they recognize, and usually this is about like a mom and dad, a caregiver. Oh, yep, they didn't give me exactly what I needed, or they didn't handle that the best, but they did the best they could. And it's not an excuse, but it's just really a realization. They couldn't give me what they didn't have.
Yeah.
And if they grew up in a home without Christ, and they just came to Christ 2 years before I was born, there's a lot of things that they couldn't give me. Or if they grew up in abuse, they couldn't give me what they didn't have.
Yeah. And
and there's a real freedom there. I think in part it gets to that intention, that we really grasp. They didn't want to hurt me. They just, either they didn't know they were hurting me, or they didn't know how to do it differently.
How to not
and it's
hurt.
just, so as we sit here and talk about it, it sounds like, okay, well, that makes sense. But when you're in that moment and you're really like seeing, oh, they were doing the best they could.
Yeah.
They just had nothing but love for me. It really sets you free.
Yeah.
So that's what Gwen will experience.
Oh, I hope
when the
so.
time comes.
Yeah. I sometimes tell Josh, we can't both be bad parents all the time. Like, I didn't do good today. You gotta.
Well, one of the reasons we have partners, right? When one falls down, the other can help them up again.
Yeah.
Jara, I feel like you just got classic Shari'd. You said this problem that you have, and then Shari gives you this like great advice.
Oh yeah.
In just the perfect way.
That is.
And it's like.
That is very. She had the
nothing more
words.
needs to be said.
No.
See, and I know you enough to know, like, I'm going to confront this.
Oh, yeah,
you
you just say it now.
Around it, or ask, is it okay if we challenge this?
That's wonderful.
Oh, funny. Well, I know we're probably running close on time, but one of the questions that I thought, I've been thinking about this one a lot, was like parenting, like what parenting advice would I have? And I've thought about that a lot. And I think one of the things that the philosophies that I had, or what I've learned, is like our job as parents, it's easy to want to make our kids into our image, like, because what we like and what we enjoy, and really our job is to make them who God created them to be.
Yeah.
So that definitely takes consistency and discipline and lots of things, and dying to yourself. Like, does this bother me just because I don't like loud noises, so I don't want banging on the pots and pans, or because it's really causing a problem? Or am I setting you up, like, we don't rip the pages out of library books because that's destroying somebody else's property, and this is a life lesson, versus I don't want noise.
Yeah.
So
that's
like,
annoying.
We do have to die to ourselves. Is this a sin, or is it just me.
Yeah.
And that's really important too. But like the sooner that we can recognize and embrace, like, okay, this is God created this child in this way for his purposes, and how can I help that child grow into all that God has for them, even if they're not like me at all.
Which, like,
How can I
Sherry, the
help
crazy thing is that I don't want Gwen to be like I want her to be who God is, but my fear is that I will get in the way of that, like with who I am. Not that I don't like myself,
right?
But I definitely see the flaws, and I don't want that for her. And that would be like more of the problem for me.
My kids, I don't know if this helps you, but my kids have said, because we've talked about some of this, that one of the things that they feel was the most helpful to them was I was willing to apologize. Like, own up. Yeah. I sinned against you, and I'm sorry. And own it and ask their forgiveness for it, And I wonder if, like, a lot of kids that grow up in the church and leave the church, like, don't have that. So that does take growth on our part as parents, that we have to be vulnerable and willing.
Yeah.
And I've known, especially the generation ahead of me, like, why would an adult ever apologize to a child? Like, that's just not appropriate. But that's not where we are now, fortunately.
No. Yeah.
But that does a lot for them, for you to be able, you don't have to be perfect, but if you're humble enough,
that
to
makes
say,
me feel better.
I'm sorry
very
that
willing
I hurt you.
to
I
say
sinned.
sorry.
Yeah.
That makes me feel better.
And that makes a big difference in their lives. And my kids have said that was really huge for them. That it helps them overlook the areas where I wasn't.
Well, yeah, and
perfect.
Yes. So I'm forgetting about forgiveness, and I'm forgetting about grace, and I'm forgetting about apology.
Yeah. And forgiving our kids is something we have to do too.
Yeah.
That it can be easy for us to think like, oh, they're just out to get me, and they're just in their own little world. Like when you guys talked with Maria about pets, she caught it. I'm not a big animal person, but that was really helpful for me to understand. Oh, they don't have intentions. They're just doing their thing. I can have a lot more grace for that, but really in some ways our kids are like that too. Like they're not thinking, how can I make mom's day worse today? I'm going to take the lid off this drink and,
Yeah.
They're just kind of like, oh, I'm curious what happens. And they're not thinking about you at all.
Yeah, yep. Don't take it personal.
So don't take it personally. And recognize there's folly and there's a lot of experimentation. They have to learn and grow. And forgive them. Like, I forgive you for making me late because I had to clean the Kool-Aid off the floor before we could go, or whatever it is.
It sounds like a specific example. Which kid was it?
Well, yeah, we didn't have that specific one, but I did have a time period where, like, Ray had asked me with Miles. He was like, "Do you love him?" And I was like, "What? How dare you?" Like, I'm his mom, but then he's like, "I think you're not forgiving him," and he was probably a toddler. He was just doing toddler stuff or 3-year-old stuff.
Yeah.
But it was hard, but I had to recognize, you're right. I'm taking things personally.
Yeah.
And like, you are defying me. How dare you?
Well, it feels disrespectful.
Disrespect is one of my hot buttons.
Uh-huh.
So when he's disrespecting me like 90 times a day, but Ray helped me see, I got to forgive that.
Yeah.
And so then things got a lot better.
Yeah. At one time it was like 12:30, 1 a.m. I said something about what Gwen was doing, like she was waking up a lot and she'd given me a hard time. And I said, she just keeps doing this to me. He was like, you're acting like she's doing it to you. Like, you are crazy. It was like we were both tired, but he was like, you're crazy. This is not about you. Like, why is she doing this to me?
Isn't it good to have partners in life who sometimes will just be like, come on, you're not seeing this right.
You need to, like, and he's also told me, you just need to, like, leave. You can't be in the room right now because you're not reacting very well.
Yep, yeah, but we learned so much from then being, and pointing things out.
Uh-huh.
So you're going to mess up. Hopefully Gwen will forgive you. I'm sure she will.
I'm sure she
And if she has to have something to process, it might as well be about you,
Yeah.
Because think of all don't think specifically about the bad things, but there are so many other bad things out there in life that our kids could experience.
That is true.
That if what they're experiencing
if it's like the worst thing is my mom, I don't know.
Yeah.
Whatever.
My mom was mediocre.
There we go. Yeah, that's the worst thing. She's got a pretty good life.
My mom always wants to lay down.
And she never wants to help in the middle of the night.
Like, she never... That will be her thing, is like, my mom wants to lay down.
I did really like what you said about not trying to make our kids in our own image, though, because I think I'm gonna run into that a lot with Arthur because, like, for myself, you can just grab your mic and just put it where you want it. But
It's just that arm.
anyways, like myself, I really enjoy like books and like things that are in my head. And when I was a kid, like, I feel like I've had a complicated relationship with balls. Like, Arthur loves balls. He loves throwing balls. He loves football. He sees basketball hoops and he's like, basketball. And it's like, I've never been a sports guy. And part of that is because, like, I felt like I wasn't as good at it as other kids. And I probably was just fine at it. I have always had a problem of, like, thinking that if someone else is better than me at something, then there's no point in me
Right.
even
If you can't
trying.
be the best.
You're the best, yeah. We can relate.
But so like as a kid, I felt like, oh yeah, football's not for me, basketball's not for me, baseball's not for me. In fact, like one of the times I tried playing baseball as a kid, I was like shortstop, the position. I was supposed to be shortstop, and I was making a mound for shortstop because I was like, why don't I get a mound? And then the person batting hit like a line drive, and it hit me right in the jaw. So anyways, and whenever I would try to kick a football, it would go backwards. So
I
it was
heard about like you playing soccer too, that you were like just looking at the sky.
Well,
You didn't know
that
what
was
you were
better than
looking
what Josh was doing. Josh was playing soccer, talking into his spy watch.
at. He hates that stuff.
No, but that's challenging. So, like, with our kids, I mean, people know our family. These are no secrets, but Miles was more like me. At least at one point. Like, he would process out loud. He doesn't do that so much anymore, but he would process verbally. You always knew what he was thinking. But we could relate to each other. Well, he also expresses his emotions, which I can be emotional. And Maria is more like Ray. Like, she's gonna figure it out in her own head before you even know what she's thinking about. And it used to drive me crazy. You know, I'd be like, Ray, how do we, like, I can see that she's like misunderstanding things, or she doesn't have all the information and she's drawing the wrong conclusions and it's hurting her, but she won't let me in. Like, how do we make her talk? And he was like, you don't. All you can do is like create the opportunity and wait for her to walk through it. And I'm like, not good enough because she's not doing it. Like, we gotta make her. And he was like, nope, you don't make her. And I was like, no, you're useless. This is not helpful, you know? Now, by that point in time, Miles had probably quit sharing everything too. But but I felt like in some ways I felt so much more connected to Miles because I got at least parts of him. And then Maria, like, she's a mystery. Like, you know, we have a good relationship now, but we're not alike. And I think she and her dad connect more in some ways because they're more alike.
It's crazy that you say that. I feel like Maria just says things like that she thinks. Like, she expresses herself, but
She must feel safer with you than she feels with me.
Well, maybe. She told me flat out, May is an ugly month, and that's when my daughter was born, and that Gwen looked,
That's funny. Her birthday's in May, too. Did you know
She doesn't like it.
Oh, okay, good
And
to
she
know.
told me September's an ugly month, that's when this baby's due.
Oh, well, sometimes she does not have a filter. But, you know, that's
But
a newer thing that
I
she actually
think about it
expresses
as
things.
she feels comfortable with me and that it wouldn't hurt my feelings, but I always thought she just said what she thought.
Yeah, no.
I think
she
she's
kept it
changing that
inside.
more recently.
That's probably it.
I think she has. So I prayed. I mean, like, starting from a young age, I'm like, Lord, please send her a husband who she is willing to talk to, because, like, I feel sorry for this girl. She goes, like, her whole upbringing not feeling comfortable talking about stuff, and then her whole marriage not feeling like, oh,
Yeah.
Lord, that would be bad. Just so I was like, bless you, Sam. I don't understand how you guys connect necessarily, but
You
bless
figure
you.
it out.
She feels safe with you. I think does she talk to you? I think she does. Yeah, you know, but I knew from a young age, like, we just got to get ready for the next step of her life.
Yeah, we just gotta survive this.
This is not where she's going to thrive as much as I think she will later. And that was hard as a mom, you know, and I still did my best, but she probably has a lot more renew to do.
Well, you have Elena, who's more of a jock, right?
Yeah. Well, to just not leave my thought, because I started going off on a tangent about myself, but with Arthur really loves balls, and I think he's gonna be a sports kid.
I hope so.
And I don't know. I'm kind. My retirement plan right now is Arthur goes to the NFL.
That's a good one. That's a good one.
Yeah. So that's my retirement plan. But myself, I would really like a kid who like likes philosophical things or like reading old books.
Well, maybe
or
your next one will.
Maybe, but I think she's gonna be like some skater punk. Because I don't know, we're just assuming that she's our revenge baby and she's gonna be like
Arthur was too good to you guys.
Arthur is just like the perfect child. He's too nice and wonderful. So I don't know.
Now this one.
We'll see.
Well, I think God ordains the families and the personalities. Jolene Lagerman always told me that, like, we prayed for the perfect child, for like our family, and they adopted all their kids. But, God give us the perfect blend. And she said there were times that was really helpful when I didn't like them or things weren't going well. It's like, okay, I prayed and asked God to give me the right kid.
Yeah.
So even though this one is driving me crazy, like, God's in this and he's going to bring good from it.
Yeah.
But shaping them. And it makes us grow, too. Like I can let Ray tell more of this if he chooses to in his podcast down the road, but like having a child who wanted to be a professional musician when his dad is an engineer, that was some stretching, for us. And it
hard,
was, we had a conversation. This happened to be me initiating this conversation because Miles had opened up to me, that like, hey, I asked my drum teacher, he was probably like a freshman in high school at this point, maybe a sophomore, if I'm good enough to be a professional drummer. Like, what did he say? And he said, I think you might be. And so then, I went home and was like, Ray, we have a decision to make. Like, because we'd kind of been like, oh, we'll do this for your job, and then you can play in a band on the side, And he would be like, okay, for a month.
But now,
and then he'd be like, I don't really want to be a teacher. I don't really want to be in business. I don't really like that. He was always willing to like consider it, but he kept coming back to, I just want to play drums. That's all I want to do is play drums. And so finally when he confided, like, okay, he talked to somebody who is a professional drummer and said, can I do this? And the guy was like, I think you can. I'm like, we have a decision to make. Like, are we going to get behind him and help him pursue this and see where it goes? Because if not, I think we're going to end up butting heads and it's going to, it's just going to be problematic. And so, we got on board and, encouraged him, like, see what happens, but be smart about it, and I think he has made good choices. We didn't see him getting married at 19 or 20, maybe they were 21. So we're like, by the time you find a woman and get married, like, you'll have an idea, can I make? And then, like, his first month at college, there's this girl! Like, okay,
well, and marrying Haley, like, she's just the perfect girl for him in this situation. Like, she is so wonderful. And
And just in life, I was telling somebody recently, like a coworker, that at their wedding, sitting in the front row, and I'm watching this, and I'm like, they just make sense together.
Oh, they do.
And like them getting married, this is just the next step. This is just perfect. Like this, we shouldn't be anywhere else doing anything else.
I cried so much at their wedding because I was like, you guys waited forever to get married. It felt like forever for me, but I'm sure it felt longer for them as well.
But that's just a way, and I guess we also tried to instill in him as he's going after this dream of, be wise, like, got to be realistic about, like, can I do this or not? But I told him, like, right before he went to Indiana, I told him, so then that's after 2 years at Kirkwood, so he's like 20, 21. I said, Miles, I'm praying that if you can't play for whatever reason, like you get injured or you're not good enough to be competitive at the level you would need to be to make a living at it, whatever, I'm praying that you'll find another aspect of the industry or another avenue for a career that you're just as passionate about as you are about playing right now. And his eyes got big. He's like, that's what I've been praying, and so it was cool, like that mother-son moment, but also just to know, like, God's got him and God wants to use him for his glory somewhere, somehow. And seems to be doing great. And, he's just launching his career, really, but God's already, I think, just using him and building relationships by just the spirit shining through him, that he's different to work with. Drummers are kind of divas. And, so I think people that play with him and for him can see that there's a difference. He has a servant's heart and he's gracious and accommodating, but yet he's serious, about what he's doing. Anyway, I'm really proud of him, but but it was a risk of like music, that's a really cutthroat business. This could not be good, but then we've also learned, I don't even know all of them, but there are so many things that you can do, especially like since he's in Nashville area. There are people whose job is recording demo tracks. So like somebody writes music and they record it so that then the labels can pitch it to other artists. That's your job. Just recording things that might be a hit someday so that people can hear what it sounds like. I'm like, what? A whole career out of that?
So when Arthur decides, like when he tells me that he wants to be in the NFL,
It's the NFL.
I gotta just get behind him.
To the best you can. You know, Miles was going to be in the NFL too, and then he quit playing football, and he was still going to be in the NFL. And I said, "How does this work?" And he said, "They've got scouts; they'll find me." You know, so there's a balance there. You know, pursue it until you can tell that, like, hey, you're not pursuing this well enough.
Yeah, that's funny.
You know, yeah, but we encourage, like, you know, as we saw that this was a potential, we're like, pursue it when you're young. And again, we were hoping that when you're single and you don't have much overhead and you don't have much responsibility, you know, so that hopefully you'll have a chance to see, can I make this work?
Yeah.
You know, will this be compatible with the kind of family life that I want to have?
Yeah.
You know, so now we trust God has that because he didn't have the chance to figure out alone, you know, what that looks like. But man, having Haley in his life has really been a good thing. So, you know, God knew what he was doing, but I think that he's still keeping that in mind, you know, as he's pursuing this dream of like, how do I make this work for my family? And what he's doing now, I don't think he sees himself doing that for his whole life. You know, for this season, this is what he's doing. But if God closes the door or for some reason it's no longer working for them, I think God will open another door. Yeah. And it will be a good one. Yeah.
Liberians like to say you birth the child, but you don't birth their heart. You like give birth to the child, but you don't give birth to their heart. They're going to come with like how the Lord has made them, you know, their own desires and personality traits and everything, and then you just kind of work with that. Yeah.
It's kind of like a gift that we get to unwrap, you know, that God, and not just he gave us, but that's why I loved parenting teens. Now, like and not everybody has this experience, so it's not like I'm wonderful. Like God just blessed us in some ways that were outside of our control. You know, but we put a lot of work when they were younger, training and teaching and developing their character to the best that we could. And then when they were older, there was trust already there, partially because of choices they made and God's intervention and stuff, but partially those relationships. And then we got to watch them figure out, what do I enjoy? What am I good at? What am I passionate about? What do I want to pursue? And that's really fun when you get to be alongside your kids doing that rather than just butting heads with them all the time. Be realistic, grow up. You can't make a living doing that. Yeah. You know, but helping them like figure out, okay, you love this. You know, you love playing video games. Is there an opportunity to make a living? What role does this play in your life? Yeah. But it's really fun to see them learn that, to see them discover that, and to see their passions come out. Like right now it is balls for Arthur.
Arthur throws things. Yeah. He's good at throwing things.
You know, Kipton was exactly the same way, plumber, and he isn't only about balls now. So there's hope for Arthur that, you know, one day he'll have other interests.
One day he'll be reading Plato with me.
He might be.
Yeah.
Anyways, it's probably a good spot to stop.
Okay.
I mean,
there was a couple things. You're gonna be a grandma here soon. I'm sorry, Joseph. I'm very excited about that. I just wanted to
keep it short.
Talk
Sherry,
about that.
I think you're about to break the record for a longest.
I'm sorry.
Well, there was that break in there.
There was a break.
There was a little break.
Okay.
So
I did not want to have the longest one. I'll be honest.
You have. But it's so interesting and fun.
Okay, well, just edit some out.
Yeah, just the parts that are, you know. But you being a grandma, I wanted to talk about that, how you're feeling about that, how excited you are about that. And then I wanted to talk about ask, because you said you listen to our podcast and you think through some of the questions we talk about. And I know when we were conversing about, like, you coming here, you said you wanted to talk about some things, not talk about some things.
Okay.
I was wondering if there was anything that we didn't ask about or you didn't get to talk about that you wanted to.
Okay. So being a grandma, people are probably going to think this is weird, but like even when I was pregnant with my own kids, like there's a level, I kind of keep a lid on it. You can't let your emotions get out of control. You can't get too excited. Lots of things could happen.
Right.
But like when they're here and like for when they're safe and they arrive, but then too, like you get to know them and you get to meet them. That's what I find exciting. So like I'll be honest, when our kids first got married and they got married young, we were happy like I was happy to not become a grandma right away. For like for part it was like I just spent 20 years raising these kids and spending a lot of time with them, and I'm ready for some adult time. And we've enjoyed having like holidays and taking trips and stuff as just a family of adults, you know, where we don't have to worry about nap schedules and this and that. So this has been a great season, but I'm happy, you know, like I'm really happy that Sam and Maria are expecting and look forward to being a grandma, but I also don't like project a whole lot. We'll figure it out when we get here. Because I don't know, maybe this kid will be all snuggly and maybe they'll be like, I don't want anybody touching me. And so I'm excited, but like not in the squeal.
Like I can't wait.
And this is what my whole life is going to be about, you know, like it's going to be an important part of my life, but
it's not all.
It's not my baby.
I think Maria mentioned on her podcast that she really appreciates that.
Okay.
Yeah, that you guys are very like not hands off, but like it's really important to you to let that be their kid and like their life and their decisions and
and sometimes I'll be honest, I struggle with that, like are we too uninvolved or are we too uncaring or whatever, but when I've asked Ray about that, like especially shortly after we released them, you know, I'm like, are we too hands off? Like, did we? And he looked at me like, no, we've spent their whole lives preparing them to be independent adults, you know, and like now they're doing it. Okay. Because, you know, some of our friends or some people around us with kids similar ages were kind of like, a little bit more stressed out about that or micromanaging a little bit more some of the choices. And I'm like, are we too chill? And Ray's like, no. Like, we've just been intentional. So good. I'm glad she appreciates that. And I just asked her the other day, I'm like, hey, this is a ways down the road, but think about like, when the baby comes, you're like, what do you want? What support do you want? What help do you want? I'll do whatever, you know, but if you say like, don't come around for a month, then I won't, you know, like, or if you're like, I want you there the minute I get home from the hospital, you know, just think about what role, you know, how you want me to be involved. So it's good to hear. I mean, she acted like she appreciated that. So I'm glad to hear confirmation from you.
Yeah, she wasn't lying.
She does. Okay, that's the grandmother question. Anything else? No, I mean, I know I did ask you a while back about some topics. We kind of touched on some of them. And nope,
You feel like
I feel like I've said all the words.
Oh, good.
My husband will be so happy.
Oh, yeah.
No, maybe he won't. How was it? I'm done. You'll have to listen to it for a long time if you want to hear the words.
Well, the great thing about listening to it in podcast form is you can listen to it on double speed.
Oh, good.
So
those times I talk fast will be just not understandable.
Yeah.
The bad part is he and I listen to some of them together in the car. That's when he listens.
Yeah.
And I'm not listening to this with him.
Well, that makes sense.
He's going to be on his own.
Yeah, listen to your own
Unless
voice.
one of you wants to invite him on a road trip and then play it. That would be okay, but I'm not going.
Yeah. I obviously like listen to them when we're doing this, and then I have to listen to them again to edit it, and then there's times where my wife has tried listening to it around me and I'm just like, do not. I'm done with that episode.
I bet you are.
So we've moved on.
Yes.
Wow.
Great. Well, thank you guys. I'm so glad that I finally got to come.
Yeah.
This
Yes.
is fun.
Awesome.
And now I know I've got some to go catch up on because I am behind.
Yeah. Well, you are very interesting, and this was such a fun conversation.
It
There's a
was
reason
fun.
it was so long.
And I was hoping that I would not forget that there was like a camera and like go off and say something inappropriate. So I'm glad that did not happen.
Yeah. You did not.
Okay.
Wow. Thank you everyone for listening.
Thank you.